Have you ever trusted someone so much that you were willing to bury your entire past? Seraphina DeLuca did just that. She gave up her mafia throne, erasing the blood of power flowing through her veins to become the dutiful wife of a Wall Street billionaire. But tonight, upon discovering her husband's betrayal, the monster sleeping within her awakens. This isn't a story about a betrayed wife. This is a story about a mafia queen reclaiming her throne. Watch until the end, and comment the city you're currently viewing to let me know how far this story has progressed. Now let's begin. The rain came down like bullets against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse, each drop exploding on impact, running in chaotic streams down the glass. Inside, the temperature was controlled, perfect, 72 degrees exactly, but Seraphina couldn't shake the cold that had settled into her bones. She sat in the dark living room, her bare feet tucked under her on the leather sofa that cost more than most people's cars, staring at the phone screen that glowed like a tiny sun in her hands. Miss you already. Tonight was perfect. Vanessa. 6 words. That's all it took. 6 words to burn down 8 years of marriage, 8 years of carefully constructed lies she'd told herself every morning when she woke up next to him. 8 years of pretending she was just Seraphina Cross, self-made entrepreneur, woman who pulled herself up from nothing. 8 years of hiding who she really was. The shower was still running in the master bathroom. Sebastian always took long showers after his business dinners. She used to think he was washing away the stress of Wall Street. Now she knew better. He was washing away the perfume of another woman. Her thumb hovered over the phone screen. She could delete the message, pretend she never saw it, swallow it down like she'd swallowed down so many other small betrayals. The late nights, the unexplained charges on credit cards she wasn't supposed to see, the way he'd stopped looking at her during sex months ago, eyes closed, thinking of someone else. But Seraphina DeLuca had never been good at swallowing anything. She set the phone down on the coffee table, face up, message still glowing. Then she stood and walked to the window, pressing her palm against the cold glass. New York stretched out below her, 47 floors down, a carpet of lights that never slept. She'd fallen in love with this city once, fallen in love with the idea that here you could be anyone, that your last name didn't matter, that blood wasn't destiny. What a stupid, naive girl she'd been. Behind her, the shower cut off. She heard Sebastian humming something off-key through the walls. He was happy. Of course he was happy. He had everything. A beautiful wife who never questioned him, a booming hedge fund, a penthouse in Manhattan, and apparently a mistress named Vanessa who thought tonight was perfect. Seraphina caught her reflection in the window, dark hair falling loose around her shoulders, expensive silk robe that Sebastian bought her for their anniversary last year, back when he still pretended to care. She looked soft, delicate, harmless. She'd spent 8 years building that image. Time to burn it down. She walked to the bedroom and pulled open the drawer of her nightstand, the one Sebastian never opened because he wasn't curious about her anymore, hadn't been for years. Inside, buried under old magazines and a journal she never wrote in, was a phone. Not a regular phone. A different one. The one she'd kept charged and hidden for 8 years, just in case. Just in case she ever needed to go home. Her fingers shook as she powered it on. The screen lit up with a wallpaper she hadn't seen in nearly a decade. The gates of the DeLuca estate, iron and imposing, wrapped in morning fog. Her thumb moved on muscle memory, pulling up a contact that had no name, just a single black heart emoji. She typed 3 words. I'm coming home. The response came in less than 10 seconds. We've been waiting. The bathroom door opened. Steam rolled out, carrying the scent of Sebastian's expensive body wash, the one that cost $150 a bottle because he liked to tell people at parties what it cost. He stepped out wearing nothing but a towel around his waist, water still dripping from his hair, and smiled at her. That easy, charming smile that had made her believe in fairy tales once upon a time. Hey, beautiful, he said, like he hadn't just spent the evening with another woman. You waited up for me? Seraphina looked at him. Really looked at him. Sandy brown hair, blue eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled, the kind of face that belonged on magazine covers. Sebastian Cross, the golden boy of Wall Street, the man everyone wanted to be or be with. The man she'd married believing he would be different from the men in her old world, believing he would be honest, faithful, good. She'd been so wrong. We need to talk, she said. His smile faltered. Now, baby, it's almost midnight. I'm exhausted. I bet you are. Something in her voice made him stop, made him actually look at her instead of through her. Seraphina, what's wrong? She picked up his phone from the coffee table and tossed it to him. He caught it reflexively, confusion crossing his face. Then he looked at the screen and the color drained from his face so fast she thought he might pass out. I can explain, he started. Don't. The word came out sharp, cutting. Don't insult me by trying to explain. Just tell me how long. Seraphina, how? Long. He ran a hand through his wet hair, water droplets flying. 6 months. But it's not. It doesn't mean anything. It was just 6 months. She laughed and it came out wrong, jagged. 6 months you've been fucking her and coming home to me. 6 months of looking me in the eye and lying. You're never here. The words exploded out of him, defensive and desperate. You're always working, always traveling, always busy with your business. What was I supposed to do? Not cheat on your wife would be a good start. That's rich coming from you. His face twisted into something ugly. You think I don't know you're hiding something? You think I haven't noticed how you won't talk about your family, how you change the subject every time I ask about your past? You've been lying to me since the day we met. The room went very quiet. The rain had stopped. In the silence, Seraphina could hear her own heartbeat, steady and slow. You're right, she said finally. I have been lying to you. Sebastian blinked, caught off guard by the admission. What? I've been lying about who I am, about where I come from, about what I'm capable of. She moved toward him, and something in her movement made him take a step back. I lied because I wanted to be normal. I wanted to believe I could have a regular marriage, a regular life. I wanted to believe love was enough. Seraphina, you're scaring me. Good. She reached past him and pulled open the closet, grabbing a suitcase and throwing it on the bed. You should be scared, because the woman you married doesn't exist anymore. She died tonight, along with every stupid hope I had that you were different. What are you doing? Leaving. She started pulling clothes from hangers, not bothering to fold them, just stuffing them into the suitcase. And taking back everything I gave you. What the hell is that supposed to mean? She stopped and turned to face him. In the low light of the bedroom, with her hair wild and her eyes hard, she looked like a different person. She was a different person. It means every business connection you have is through me. Every investor who took a meeting with you, every deal that went through when it shouldn't have. That was me, Sebastian. My influence, my name, you just didn't know it. You're insane. No. She zipped the suitcase closed. I was insane for thinking I could leave my world behind. But I'm done pretending now. She pulled off her wedding ring and set it on the dresser. The diamond caught the light, throwing tiny rainbows across the wall. She'd stared at that ring for 8 years, believing it meant something. Now it just looked like a pretty lie. Seraphina, wait. But she was already moving, already walking out of the bedroom with her suitcase, heading for the front door. Sebastian followed, the towel slipping from his waist, but he didn't seem to notice or care. You can't just leave. We need to talk about this. She opened the door and looked back at him one last time. He stood there naked and panicking, and she felt nothing, no love, no hate, just a cold, clear certainty. You'll be served divorce papers tomorrow morning, she said. I suggest you get a good lawyer. You're going to need one. This is insane. Over one mistake? No. She smiled, and it was not a nice smile. This is over 8 years of mistakes. Mine, for believing you. Yours, for thinking I was powerless. She walked out and didn't look back. The elevator ride down 47 floors felt like falling. Seraphina stood alone in the mirrored box, watching herself multiply into infinity. The woman staring back at her looked wild, dangerous. Good. She was tired of looking soft. The lobby was empty except for the night doorman, who jumped to attention when he saw her. Mrs. Cross, do you need help with your bag? Not Mrs. Cross anymore, she said, walking past him into the rain that had started up again. A black car was already waiting at the curb, engine running. The driver got out and opened the back door without being asked. He was young, maybe 30, with the kind of face that forgot to smile and sharp eyes that saw everything. He wore a black suit with a silver pin on the lapel, a wolf's head, small and discreet. The DeLuca family crest. Miss DeLuca, he said, taking her suitcase. Welcome home. She slid into the back seat and the door closed, sealing her into darkness and leather and the smell of gun oil. The car pulled away from the curb smoothly, merging into late-night Manhattan traffic. Seraphina looked back once at the building where she'd lived for 8 years. Sebastian was probably still standing in the apartment, naked and confused, trying to figure out what just happened. He'd figure it out soon enough. Everyone would. The drive took 40 minutes, leaving Manhattan behind, crossing the river, heading into New Jersey where the trees got thicker and the houses got further apart. The deeper they went, the darker it got, until there were no streetlights anymore, just the high beams cutting through rain and darkness. Then the gates appeared, 20 feet of wrought iron topped with spikes and cameras. The wolf crest was worked into the metal, fangs bared. The car stopped, and the driver rolled down his window, pressing his thumb to a scanner. Somewhere in the darkness, dogs barked. Big dogs. Guard dogs bred for violence. The gate swung open silently. The driveway was a quarter-mile long, lined with oak trees that had been there longer than Seraphina had been alive. At the end, the house rose up like something from another century, stone and iron and windows that watched like eyes. The DeLuca estate. She'd grown up here, running through these halls, learning how to shoot in the basement range, watching her father conduct business in the study where men went in confident and came out pale. She'd sworn she'd never come back. But here she was. The car stopped at the front steps. The driver opened her door and she got out, breathing in air that smelled like rain and earth and something darker, something that reminded her of blood even though there was no blood. Not tonight anyway. The front door opened before she could knock. The man standing in the doorway was tall and broad-shouldered, wearing tactical gear instead of a suit. He had a scar running from his temple to his jaw and a gun on his hip that he wore like jewelry. "Little princess," Marco said, grinning. "Damn, 8 years and you still look like you could kill a man with your pinky." "I could," Seraphina said. "I just choose not to." "Not anymore, though, yeah?" His grin widened. "Heard you're done playing house." "Where is he? Where do you think?" She walked past him into the house, her heels clicking on marble floors. Inside, nothing had changed. Same heavy furniture, same oil paintings of dead ancestors on the walls, same smell of cigar smoke and old money and violence held on a leash. Men in suits lined the hallways, all of them stopping what they were doing to stare at her. Some of them she recognized, older now, grayer, but still carrying themselves like they could kill you and not lose sleep over it. Others were new young men who'd joined the family while she was gone. All of them lowered their heads as she passed. "The princess is home," someone murmured. The whisper spread like fire. She found her father in his study, exactly where she knew he'd be. The room was all dark wood and leather, bookshelves climbing to the ceiling, a massive desk covered in papers and laptops, and 3 different phones. Lorenzo De Luca sat behind the desk in a charcoal suit that probably cost $10,000, silver cufflinks catching the light from the desk lamp. He was 63 years old and looked 50. The kind of man who aged like wine, getting more dangerous with time. His hair was steel gray, combed back from a face that could have been carved from marble. Cold. Hard. But when he looked up and saw his daughter standing in the doorway, something shifted in his expression. Seraphina. Just her name, that was all he said. But the way he said it, like a prayer, like a curse, like he'd been waiting 8 years to say it again. She crossed the room and he stood, meeting her halfway. For a moment they just looked at each other. Then he pulled her into his arms and she let herself be held, breathing in the smell of his cologne, sandalwood and leather, and something that reminded her of childhood, of safety, of home. "I'm sorry," she whispered against his shoulder. "I'm sorry I left." "Don't." His voice was rough. "Don't apologize for wanting something different. I'm just glad you came back." "He cheated on me." Lorenzo pulled back, holding her at arm's length, and the coldness was back in his face. "Name?" "Sebastian Cross." "The Wall Street boy?" His lip curled. "I told you he was garbage." "You tell me everyone is garbage." "Because everyone is." He guided her to the leather sofa by the fireplace and they sat, the logs crackling, throwing dancing shadows on the walls. "But you had to learn that yourself. I couldn't protect you from it." "I don't want protection anymore." Seraphina looked at her father, at the most feared man on the East Coast, and smiled. I want revenge. Lorenzo studied her face for a long moment. Then he smiled too, and it was a terrible smile, the kind that made grown men piss themselves. That's my girl. He stood and walked to his desk, pressing a button on one of the phones. Marco, get everyone here, every captain, every lieutenant. I don't care if they're sleeping, eating, or fucking. I want them here in 2 hours. He hung up and turned back to Seraphina. Your husband embarrassed you, humiliated you, made you look weak. Yes, that cannot stand. Not for a DeLuca. He poured 2 glasses of scotch from a crystal decanter and handed her one. We're going to throw you a party, a coming home party, and we're going to invite everyone who matters in this city, including Sebastian. Especially Sebastian. Lorenzo raised his glass. To revenge, little wolf, may it be sweet and brutal. They drank. The scotch burned going down, but it was a good burn, a familiar burn. Seraphina closed her eyes and felt something inside her shift, like a door closing on one life and opening on another. When she opened her eyes again, she wasn't the woman who'd walked out of that penthouse. She was someone else, someone older, someone dangerous. The next morning, the invitations went out. Not email invitations, not phone calls. Physical invitations, hand-delivered by men in black cars to doorsteps across New York and New Jersey. Each one was printed on heavy cardstock, the color of old blood, sealed with black wax stamped with the DeLuca wolf. The return of Seraphina DeLuca. Belladonna Opera House, Saturday, 8 p.m. Attendance mandatory. 3 words that made powerful men sweat. Mandatory. Because when the DeLuca said mandatory, they meant it. You showed up or you showed up in pieces. Sebastian got his invitation at the office during a morning meeting with potential investors. His assistant brought it in on a silver tray like it was made of poison, setting it down in front of him without a word. He stared at it, stared at the black wax seal, stared at the wolf that seemed to be staring back at him. Mr. Cross? One of the investors leaned forward. Is everything all right? Sebastian's hands were shaking as he opened the envelope. He read the invitation once, twice, 3 times. The words didn't change. Seraphina DeLuca, not Seraphina Cross. DeLuca. Jesus Christ, he whispered, because everyone in New York knew that name. Everyone who mattered, anyway. The DeLucas were the kind of family you didn't talk about in polite company. The kind of family that owned politicians and judges and police chiefs. The kind of family that made people disappear. And apparently, his wife was one of them. No, not was. Had always been. Everything clicked into place. The unexplained connections, the way doors opened for her that should have stayed closed, the CEOs who took her calls immediately, the investors who agreed to meetings with him after she made one phone call, the security team that followed her everywhere, men who carried themselves like soldiers. He'd been married to Mafia royalty and never knew it. Mr. Cross? The investor again, concerned now. Should we reschedule? Get out! Sebastian's voice came from somewhere far away. All of you, get the fuck out! They left quickly, gathering papers and laptops, practically running for the door. When the office was empty, Sebastian stood and walked to the window. His hands were still shaking. His reflection looked pale, scared. He pulled out his phone and called Vanessa. She answered on the first ring, voice bright. Sebastian, I was just thinking about you. Last night was... Did you get an invitation? Silence. Then, quietly, what? An invitation. From the DeLuca family. More silence. Then he heard her breathing change, getting faster, panicky. Oh God, Sebastian, what did we do? We? He laughed, and it came out broken. We didn't do anything. I did this. I cheated on the daughter of Lorenzo DeLuca, and now... No, you're married to a DeLuca? Vanessa's voice went up 3 octaves. You're married to the fucking mob, and you didn't think to mention that before you stuck your dick in me? I didn't know. How could you not know? She lied. She told me she was... He stopped. What had Seraphina told him? That her parents were dead? That she'd built her business from nothing? That her past was boring, not worth talking about? And he'd believed her because it was easier than asking questions. Sebastian, Vanessa was crying now. They're going to kill us. You know that, right? They're going to kill us both. No, no, they won't. I'll fix this. But he didn't know how to finish that sentence because there was no fixing this. You didn't fix betraying a DeLuca. You just died. He hung up on Vanessa's crying and dialed another number, his lawyer. Gerald, I need you to do something for me. Of course, Sebastian, what do you need? I need you to find me a way out of this city, tonight. Private plane, new identity, whatever it takes. What? Sebastian, what's going on? Just do it! He was shouting now, his careful control finally cracking. I'll pay whatever it costs. I need to disappear. But even as he said it, he knew it was useless. You didn't disappear from the DeLucas. They had eyes everywhere, connections everywhere. If they wanted to find you, they found you. The invitation sat on his desk, the wolf watching him with empty eyes. He thought about Seraphina, about the woman he'd married, the one who made him coffee in the mornings and laughed at his jokes and felt so small and soft in his arms. He thought she needed him, thought she was lucky to have him. What a fucking joke. 3 days until the party. 3 days to figure out how to survive what was coming. But in his gut, Sebastian Cross already knew the truth. He wasn't going to survive this. None of them were. Across town, in the DeLuca estate, Seraphina stood in front of her old bedroom mirror, watching seamstresses work on her dress. Black velvet that hugged every curve, cut low in the back, diamonds sewn into the fabric so she'd sparkle when she moved. A dress that cost more than most people made in a year. A dress fit for a queen. Too tight? The head seamstress asked, pins in her mouth. It's perfect. Seraphina turned, watching the fabric catch the light. Make sure the diamonds are sharp. I want them to look like weapons. Yes, Miss DeLuca. Behind her, someone knocked on the door. Come in. Marco entered, holding a tablet. You're going to want to see this. He pulled up security footage from outside Sebastian's office building. There was Sebastian, getting into his car, looking over his shoulder like he expected someone to jump him. He looked scared. Good. He called his lawyer, Marco said. Tried to arrange a private plane out of the country. And his lawyer is on our payroll. Has been for 3 years. Seraphina smiled. Perfect. Let him think he's escaping. Let him pack his bags, book his flight, then cancel everything an hour before departure. You want him desperate. I want him to know how it feels. To think you have a way out and then watch it disappear. She turned away from the mirror. Anything else? Yeah. Marco hesitated. The Moretti family confirmed attendance. The room went very quiet. All of them? Seraphina asked carefully. All of them, including Cassian. She hadn't said his name out loud in 8 years, hadn't let herself think about him, about dark eyes and rough hands and promises made in Italian vineyards while their fathers drank wine and planned empires. Cassian Moretti, her childhood best friend, her first kiss, her first everything, back before their family's alliance fell apart and they became enemies instead of friends. Good, she said, and her voice didn't shake. It wouldn't be a proper party without the Morettis. Marco studied her face. You sure about this? Inviting both families? That's a lot of tension in one room. That's the point. Seraphina walked to the window, looking out over the estate grounds where men were setting up security for the party. I want everyone there. Every family, every syndicate, every player in this city. I want them all to watch what happens when you betray a DeLuca. And Cassian? What about him? Come on, princess. I was there when you two were kids. I saw how you looked at each other. That was a long time ago. Some things don't change. Seraphina pressed her hand against the cold window glass. Everything changes, Marco. You know that better than anyone. He left her alone after that. She stood at the window for a long time, watching the sun set over the city, painting the sky in shades of blood and gold. Somewhere out there, Sebastian was panicking. Vanessa was crying. Their perfect little affair was crumbling, but Seraphina felt nothing, no satisfaction, no anger, just a cold, clear emptiness where her heart used to be. Maybe that's what happened when you stopped being one person and became another. You left pieces of yourself behind like breadcrumbs until there was nothing left but the monster you always had inside you. The party was in 3 days. 3 days until Sebastian Cross learned the cost of betraying someone who'd hidden an empire for love. 3 days until the whole city learned that Seraphina DeLuca was back, and she was done playing nice. On the third day, the Belladonna Opera House transformed. What was usually an elegant venue for performances became something else. A kingdom dressed in gold and crystal and barely concealed violence. Chandeliers dripped from the ceiling like frozen waterfalls. The marble floors were polished to mirrors. Every surface gleamed, but underneath the beauty was steel. Armed guards at every entrance, metal detectors disguised as decorative pillars, snipers on the balconies hidden behind velvet curtains. This wasn't just a party. It was a show of force. Seraphina arrived an hour early while the staff was still setting up. She wore the black velvet dress, diamonds glittering against her throat like a collar made of stars. Her hair was pulled back severe and simple, makeup sharp enough to cut. She looked beautiful and dangerous, exactly like she wanted. Lorenzo met her in the main ballroom wearing a tuxedo that made him look like old money and older violence. He kissed her cheek, then stepped back to look at her. "You look like your mother," he said quietly. Seraphina's mother had died when she was 12. Cancer, quick and brutal, taking her away in 6 months. But she remembered her mother's face, beautiful and hard, the kind of woman who smiled with her mouth but never her eyes. "Is that a compliment?" "Always." Lorenzo offered his arm. "Ready to remind this city who you are?" "I was born ready." They walked through the opera house together while staff rushed around them, adjusting flowers and testing microphones and laying out champagne flutes by the hundreds. Everything had to be perfect. Everything had to send a message. "The screen is ready?" Seraphina asked. "Set up behind the orchestra. You press the button, it comes down automatically." Lorenzo's smile was sharp. "Marco put together quite the presentation." "Good, Seraphina." He stopped walking, turned to face her. "Are you sure about this? Once you do this, there's no going back. Everyone will know. You'll be part of this world again, permanently." She thought about that, thought about the last 8 years trying to be normal, trying to be good, trying to believe that love and honesty mattered more than power. What a waste. "I'm sure," she said. Lorenzo studied her face one more time, then nodded. "Then let's give them a show they'll never forget." Guests started arriving at 7:30. They came in expensive cars with tinted windows, men in tuxedos and women in designer dresses, all of them wearing smiles that didn't reach their eyes. Mafia bosses, politicians, CEOs of companies that did business in shadows, arms dealers, money launderers. The entire criminal and political elite of New York all gathered in one place, all here because the DeLucas commanded it. Seraphina watched from a private balcony as they filed in, air-kissing and shaking hands and pretending they were friends instead of enemies held in temporary truce. She recognized most of them. Some had aged since she last saw them. Others were new faces, young men who'd risen through the ranks while she was gone. Then the Morettis arrived. She saw them before she heard them. A ripple going through the crowd, conversations pausing mid-sentence, heads turning. The Moretti family entered like they owned the place. And maybe they did, in a way. They were the only family powerful enough to challenge the DeLucas, the only ones who didn't bow and scrape. At the front walked Don Antonio Moretti, old and gray and still terrifying, flanked by his sons and lieutenants. And behind them, Cassian. Seraphina's breath caught. 8 years. She hadn't seen him in 8 years, but he looked the same, tall and dark-haired with eyes like midnight and a face that belonged on Renaissance paintings, all sharp angles and brutal beauty. He wore a tuxedo like it was armor, moving through the crowd like a shark through water, dangerous and elegant. He looked up, scanning the balconies. Their eyes met. The world stopped. For just a second, she was 16 again, sitting beside him in an Italian vineyard while fireflies danced and he promised her forever in a language she barely spoke but understood perfectly. Then the moment broke, and Cassian smiled. Not the polite smile he gave everyone else, but something real and sharp and knowing. He'd been waiting for this. Seraphina stepped back from the railing, her heart racing. "Get it together. You're not 16 anymore. You're not that girl who believed in promises." But her hands were shaking when she smoothed down her dress. At 8 o'clock exactly, the lights dimmed. Conversation died. Everyone turned toward the grand staircase where a single spotlight had appeared, bright and unforgiving. This was it. Seraphina took a breath, then stepped into the light. The ballroom exploded into noise, gasps and whispers, and the rustle of 100 people turning to stare. She descended the staircase slowly, one hand on the railing, letting them look, letting them see. The nobody wife was gone. The princess had returned. At the bottom of the stairs, Lorenzo waited. He took her hand and kissed it formally, then turned to address the room. "Ladies and gentlemen," his voice carried effortlessly, practiced from years of commanding attention, "thank you for attending tonight's celebration. 8 years ago, my daughter left us to pursue a different life. Tonight, she's come home." Applause, but it was careful, measured. Everyone knew there was more coming. "Seraphina," Lorenzo turned to her. "Would you like to say a few words?" She stepped forward, and the room went silent again. Hundreds of eyes on her. She found Sebastian in the crowd. He stood near the back, pale and sweating in a tuxedo that suddenly looked too big for him. Vanessa was beside him, crying silently. Seraphina smiled. "Thank you all for coming," she said, her voice clear and cold. "I know you're wondering why you're here. Some of you because you're curious. Some of you because you're afraid." Nervous laughter rippled through the room. 8 years ago, I left this world because I believed I could have something better, something pure. I believed in love. She let the word hang there like a curse. I was wrong. She gestured, and Marco appeared carrying something covered in black silk. He set it on a table and pulled away the covering. Sebastian's phone. The one she'd found 3 days ago, messages still on the screen. "I married a man I thought was honest," Seraphina continued. "Loyal, different from the men I grew up around. But betrayal is betrayal, whether it comes from a man in a suit or a man with a gun." Sebastian tried to move toward the exit, but found armed guards blocking his way. His face went from pale to green. "For 6 months," Seraphina's voice got harder, "my husband has been having an affair. 6 months of lies in hotel rooms and late-night messages like this one." She picked up the phone and read aloud. "Miss you already. Tonight was perfect." Vanessa made a sound like a wounded animal. "At first I was heartbroken," Seraphina said. "Then I realized something. I didn't lose a husband. I lost an illusion. And illusions are easy to replace." She pressed a button on the phone in her hand. The massive screen behind the orchestra descended with a mechanical hum. And then the show began. Photos. Dozens of them. Sebastian and Vanessa kissing outside a hotel. Sebastian and Vanessa in a restaurant. Bank transfers. Credit card statements, hotel receipts, text messages, emails. Every piece of evidence meticulously organized and displayed for the most powerful people in New York to see. The humiliation was total, complete, perfect. Sebastian's knees buckled. Vanessa was openly sobbing now, mascara running down her face in black rivers. But Seraphina wasn't done. "My husband built his business using my connections," she said. "Every investor, every contract, every success. It was because of me, because of my name. He just didn't know it." She pulled out her phone again and made a call, put it on speaker. A voice answered immediately. "Miss DeLuca?" "James, pull all DeLuca investments from Cross Capital, effective immediately." "Consider it done." She hung up and made another call. "Michael, cancel the Wellington contract." Another call. "Sarah? Sebastian Cross is no longer a recommended client. Pass it along." Call after call after call. In real time, Sebastian's empire crumbled. She could see it on his face, the moment he realized what was happening, the moment he understood that everything he had was gone. His business, his reputation, his future. All of it disappeared in 5 minutes. When she finished the last call, the ballroom was silent. Even the orchestra had stopped playing. Everyone stared at her like she was a creature from a nightmare, beautiful and terrible. Seraphina looked at Sebastian, really looked at him. This pathetic man who'd thought he could betray her and face no consequences. "You embarrassed me in private," she said softly, "so I returned the favor in public. Fair trade, don't you think?" Sebastian opened his mouth, but nothing came out. What could he say? She'd destroyed him and everyone had watched. Then someone started clapping. Slow, deliberate. Cassian Moretti pushed through the crowd, still clapping, smiling that dangerous smile. He walked right up to the platform where Seraphina stood, and the clapping turned to actual applause, spreading through the ballroom like fire. They were applauding her destruction of Sebastian Cross. They were applauding her return. Cassian reached the platform and held out his hand. For a second, Seraphina just stared at it. Then she took it, and he pulled her down, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something dark and expensive and familiar in a way that made her chest hurt. "Welcome back, Sarah," he said quietly, using the nickname only he had ever called her. "I didn't know you'd be here." "Liar," he smiled. "You knew. That's why you came home." Before she could answer, he dropped to one knee. The ballroom went insane. Cassian reached into his jacket and pulled out a box. Inside was a ring, a massive black diamond surrounded by smaller white ones, set in platinum that caught the light like captured stars. The Moretti family ring, the one given only to a wife. "When we were kids," Cassian said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "you promised me that you'd either rule this city with me or burn it down against me." Seraphina's heart was hammering. "Cassian, I've waited 8 years for you to come back. Watched you marry him." He said him like it was poison. "Watched you pretend to be someone you're not. And I waited because I promised I would." He opened the box fully and the diamond glittered like a threat. "Seraphina DeLuca, marry me. Rule this city with me. Be what you were always meant to be." The ballroom held its breath. Seraphina looked down at him. At the boy she'd loved before she knew what love cost. At the man he'd become. Dangerous and powerful, and looking at her like she was the only thing that mattered in a room full of kings. Behind her, Sebastian made a sound like he was dying. She looked back at him. At the ruins of her first marriage. At the man she'd wasted 8 years trying to fix, trying to love, trying to believe in. Then she looked at Cassian. At the ring that meant power and violence and a crown made of bones. At the future she'd been running from her entire life. She smiled and extended her hand. "Yes." The diamond slid onto Seraphina's finger like it belonged there, heavy and cold and final. The ballroom erupted, champagne corks popping, glasses raised, voices overlapping in a chaos of congratulations and shock. But Seraphina heard none of it. She was staring at Cassian's face, at the way his jaw tightened when he smiled, the way his eyes stayed dark even when the rest of him looked triumphant. He pulled her close, his hand on the small of her back, fingers pressing hard enough to bruise through the velvet. "You have no idea how long I've wanted to do that," he said against her ear. "In front of everyone? Pretty dramatic, even for you. You wanted a show." His breath was hot on her neck. "I gave you one." Around them, the Moretti and DeLuca families mingled for the first time in 8 years without violence. Old men who'd spent decades as enemies now shook hands carefully, testing boundaries. This engagement was more than a wedding announcement. It was a merger, a consolidation of power that would reshape every criminal enterprise in New York, and everyone knew it. Across the ballroom, Sebastian still stood frozen where Seraphina had destroyed him, Vanessa clutching his arm and crying into his shoulder. He looked like a ghost, pale and empty and already dead. 2 security guards moved toward him, but Lorenzo raised a hand, stopping them. "Let him watch," Lorenzo said quietly to Marco, who stood beside him. "Let him see exactly what he lost." Marco nodded. "You want him escorted out after?" "Eventually, when Seraphina's done with him." Lorenzo sipped his champagne. "My daughter has always been thorough." On the dance floor, Cassian pulled Seraphina into a waltz. The orchestra had started playing again, something classical and elegant that didn't match the violence humming beneath everyone's skin. His hand was firm on her waist, leading her through steps she'd learned as a child in this very building, back when the Morettis and DeLucas were allies, and she and Cassian were just kids who didn't know they'd grow up to be weapons. "You're tense," Cassian observed. "I just agreed to marry you in front of 200 people. I'm allowed to be tense." "You've been planning this." It wasn't a question. "The whole thing. The humiliation, the timing, even me proposing. You orchestrated all of it." Seraphina met his eyes. "Did I?" "You always were the smartest one in the room." He spun her, and the diamonds on her dress caught the light, throwing tiny stars across his face. "So what happens now? We pretend we're in love? Play house like you did with him?" We don't have to pretend anything. This is business. Something flickered in Cassian's expression. There and gone so fast she almost missed it. Right, business. The waltz ended. Cassian released her but kept her hand, raising it to his lips and kissing her knuckles while cameras flashed, playing the part perfectly. The besotted fiancé, the romantic reunion. But his eyes stayed cold. I need air, Seraphina said. Want company? No. She pulled away and headed for the balcony, pushing through the crowd of people who wanted to congratulate her, wanted to touch her dress, wanted to be close to power. She ignored them all, shoving open the glass doors and stepping into the night. The balcony overlooked the city, lights spreading out like spilled jewels. The air was cold enough to hurt her lungs. Good. She needed something real, something that cut through the performance she'd been giving all night. Behind her, the door opened again. I said I wanted to be alone, she started, then stopped. It wasn't Cassian. Sebastian stood in the doorway, looking like he'd aged 20 years in the last 3 days. His tuxedo hung wrong on him now, like he'd shrunk inside his own skin. His eyes were red-rimmed and desperate. Get out, Seraphina said. Please, just let me talk to you 5 minutes. You don't get 5 minutes. You don't get anything. Seraphina. He stepped onto the balcony and she backed away instinctively, hitting the railing. I'm sorry. God, I'm so sorry. I made a mistake. 6 months isn't a mistake. 6 months is a choice. You're right. You're absolutely right. His hands were shaking. But we can fix this. We can... There is no we. There never was. She laughed, and it came out broken. You want to know the worst part? I actually loved you. For 8 years, I convinced myself that what we had was real, that you married me for me, not for what I could give you. I did. I did marry you for you. Bullshit. You married me because I made your life easy, because I opened doors and made calls and smoothed over every rough edge in your path. You married me because I was useful. Sebastian flinched like she'd hit him. That's not fair. Fair. Seraphina's voice dropped to something dangerous. You want to talk about fair? Fair would have been you keeping your dick in your pants. Fair would have been you having the balls to divorce me before you fucked someone else. Fair would have been literally anything except what you did. I know, and I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you. You don't have a rest of your life. She said it calmly, like she was discussing the weather. Not here, anyway. By tomorrow morning, every asset you have will be frozen. Every business contact will ghost you. Every door that opened because of my name will slam shut. You're finished, Sebastian. You can't do that. I already did. She turned back to look at the city. You should leave New York, tonight. Get in your car and drive until you hit a state where the DeLuca name means nothing. And if I don't, then you'll find out why people are afraid of my family. The door burst open again, and this time it was Marco, followed by 2 guards. Miss DeLuca, your father wants... He stopped, seeing Sebastian. You want me to remove him? No. Seraphina kept her eyes on the skyline. Mr. Cross was just leaving. Weren't you, Sebastian? For a long moment, Sebastian didn't move. She could feel him staring at her, could feel the weight of 8 years crumbling between them. Then he turned and walked back inside without another word. Marco watched him go, then looked at Seraphina. You okay, princess? Stop calling me that. Never. He leaned against the railing beside her. That was cold, even for you. He deserved it. Maybe. But destroying him in front of everyone? Marrying Cassian an hour later? Marco shook his head. You're moving fast, too fast. I don't have time to move slow. Your father thinks you're doing this for revenge. He's proud of you for it. Marco pulled out a cigarette, lit it, took a long drag. But I've known you since you were 6 years old. I know when you're running from something instead of toward it. Seraphina finally looked at him. Marco was 45, built like a tank, with hands that had killed more people than she wanted to count. But his eyes were kind, always had been. He'd taught her how to shoot when she was 8, had driven her to the airport the night she fled to London, had never judged her for wanting out. I'm not running, she said. Sure you are. Question is, running from what? The marriage that failed? Or the one you just agreed to? Before she could answer, someone screamed inside the ballroom. They ran. The scene inside was chaos. Guests were backing away from something near the orchestra, voices rising in panic. Seraphina pushed through the crowd and stopped cold. Vanessa was on the floor, convulsing. Her eyes had rolled back, foam bubbling from her lips. Her champagne glass lay shattered beside her. "Call a fucking ambulance," someone shouted. But it was already too late. Seraphina had seen enough poisonings to know. The way Vanessa's body arched, the blue tint spreading across her skin, the blood trickling from her nose. 30 seconds later, Vanessa stopped moving. The ballroom went silent. Lorenzo appeared at Seraphina's side, his face carved from stone. "Everyone stay calm. Marco, lock down the building. No one leaves until we figure out what happened." "She was poisoned," Seraphina said quietly. "The champagne." "You sure?" "Look at her lips. That's cyanide." Lorenzo's jaw tightened. He turned to the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the disturbance. There's been an accident. Security will need to ask you all some questions before you leave. Please remain calm." But the room was already descending into chaos. People were backing away from their drinks, setting down glasses, wiping their hands on expensive clothes. Some were demanding to leave immediately. Others were already on their phones, calling lawyers. Seraphina scanned the crowd for Sebastian, found him standing against the far wall, staring at Vanessa's body with an expression she couldn't read. Horror? Guilt? Relief? Then she found Cassian. He was watching her, not the body. His face was blank, unreadable. When their eyes met, he smiled slightly, and something cold slithered down Seraphina's spine. The police arrived within 20 minutes, cops on the DeLuca payroll who knew how to handle sensitive situations. They photographed the body, bagged the champagne glass, took statements from shell-shocked guests. But everyone knew this wasn't a real investigation. This was containment. By midnight, the opera house was empty except for family. The Morettis had left quickly, Don Antonio making polite excuses about the late hour, but the tension in his goodbye told Seraphina everything. This was bad. A murder at a DeLuca celebration, at the announcement of a Moretti-DeLuca union? This would echo through the underworld for years. Seraphina sat in the private room backstage, still in her black dress, diamonds dulled now in the fluorescent lighting. Lorenzo stood by the window, phone pressed to his ear, speaking in rapid Italian. Marco was outside, coordinating with cleanup crews. The door opened and Cassian walked in without knocking. "Thought you left," Seraphina said. "And missed the after-party?" He poured himself a drink from the bar cart. "Besides, we need to talk." "About?" "About the dead girl. About the fact that someone poisoned her at our engagement party. About what that means for both our families. It means we have a problem. It means someone's making a move." Cassian swirled his drink. "Question is, who? And why now?" Lorenzo hung up and turned to face them. "The Bratva is claiming it wasn't them. So are the Yakuza and the Irish. Either they're all lying or it's someone else," Seraphina finished. "Someone we're not thinking of. Or it's one of us." Cassian's voice was casual, but his eyes were sharp. "Someone in the DeLuca or Moretti families who doesn't want this marriage to happen." The room went very cold. "Careful," Lorenzo said softly. "You're talking about betrayal. I'm talking about reality. Our families have been enemies for 8 years. You think everyone's thrilled about this reunion? You think there aren't people on both sides who'd rather see us at war?" "Vanessa was nobody," Seraphina said. "Why kill her? If someone wanted to send a message, they'd go after—" She stopped. "They'd go after you," Cassian finished. "But they couldn't. Too obvious, too protected. So they went after the weakest link, the mistress. And now everyone's scared, everyone's suspicious, and the alliance looks shaky before it even starts." He was right. Seraphina hated it, but he was right. Someone was playing them. "We need to find out who," Lorenzo said. "Fast, before this spirals." "I'll talk to my father," Cassian offered. "Have him question everyone in our organization. You do the same. Between us, we'll find the leak. And in the meantime?" Cassian looked at Seraphina. "In the meantime, we move forward. Fast. The wedding happens as planned. We show everyone this alliance is solid, that we're not scared." "The wedding?" Seraphina stood. "Someone just died at our engagement party and you want to throw a wedding?" "That's exactly why we throw a wedding. We show strength, not fear." He moved closer to her. "Unless you're having second thoughts?" "I don't have second thoughts. I have brain cells." Then use them. Think about what backing out looks like. Think about the message it sends. He was right again. Damn him. Backing out now would make them look weak, make the alliance look unstable. It would invite more attacks, more chaos. How fast? She asked. 2 weeks. That's insane. That's necessary. Cassian finished his drink and set the glass down with a sharp click. 2 weeks. Big ceremony, bigger reception, every family, every player. We make it clear that the DeLucas and Morettis are united, and anyone who has a problem with it can get in line to die. Lorenzo nodded slowly. It could work. Show of force. It's a target, Seraphina countered. You want to put everyone we care about in one place and paint a bullseye on them? I want to flush out whoever's behind this. Cassian's face was hard. They made a move. Now we make one back. Bigger, louder. And we watch to see who flinches. Seraphina looked at her father. He was considering it. She could see the calculations behind his eyes. Risk versus reward. Safety versus statement. Do it, Lorenzo said finally. 2 weeks. I'll make the arrangements. You're all insane, Seraphina said. We're all survivors, Lorenzo corrected. There's a difference. The meeting broke up after that. Cassian left first, pausing at the door to look back at Seraphina. Get some sleep. You look exhausted. Fuck you, he smiled. 2 weeks, Sarah. Then you'll have to. The door closed behind him. Lorenzo waited until they were alone, then crossed to his daughter and put his hands on her shoulders. Are you sure about this? About which part? The marriage? The investigation? The whole burning disaster? All of it. Seraphina met her father's eyes. No, I'm not sure about any of it, but I'm committed now. No turning back. There's always a way back. Not for me. Not anymore. She touched the ring on her finger, Cassian's ring, the Moretti family diamond. I made my choice when I came home. Everything after is just consequences. Lorenzo pulled her into a hug, and for a moment she let herself be small again, let herself be just his daughter, instead of a chess piece in a game she was still learning the rules to. I'm proud of you, he said into her hair. Your mother would be too. Mama would have told me to run, to get out while I still could. Probably. She always was smarter than me. He released her, smoothing her hair back like he used to when she was little. Get some rest. Tomorrow we start planning. Seraphina went home, not to the penthouse she'd shared with Sebastian, but to her old bedroom in the DeLuca estate. Someone had prepared it for her, fresh sheets on the bed, her old things exactly where she'd left them 8 years ago, trophies from shooting competitions, photos from before everything went wrong, a stuffed wolf her mother gave her when she was 6. She sat on the edge of the bed and finally let herself feel it. The exhaustion, the fear, the creeping certainty that she'd just made a terrible mistake. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. Then curiosity won. Hello? You looked beautiful tonight. The voice was distorted, run through some kind of filter. Like a queen. Seraphina's blood went cold. Who is this? Someone who's been watching you for a long time. Someone who knows what you did. What I did? 8 years ago, London. The reason you really left. A pause. Did you think no one would find out? The phone went dead. Seraphina stared at it, her hands shaking. London. The real reason she'd fled to England, the secret she'd never told anyone, not even her father. The thing she'd buried so deep she sometimes convinced herself it never happened. But someone knew. Someone knew, and they'd just killed Vanessa to prove it. She stood and locked her bedroom door, then dragged a chair under the handle for extra measure, pulled her gun from the drawer where she'd left it 8 years ago, still loaded, still clean. Marco had kept it maintained for her. She sat on the bed with the gun in her lap and waited for morning. It came slowly, gray light filtering through heavy curtains. Seraphina hadn't slept. Every sound in the house made her jump, footsteps in the hallway, doors closing, the wind rattling windows. By the time the sun was fully up, she felt like she'd been awake for weeks. Her phone buzzed again. Lorenzo, family meeting, 9 a.m. Everyone attends. She showered and dressed in jeans and a black sweater, clothes that felt like armor after the vulnerability of the velvet dress. Pulled her hair back severe. No makeup. She looked tired and mean, and that was fine. That was accurate. The meeting was in the formal dining room, the long table that could seat 30. But this morning it only sat 12. Lorenzo at the head, his top lieutenants flanking him. Marco, Dominic, Santiago. Men who'd been with the family for decades. And at the far end of the table, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else, was Luca, Seraphina's younger brother. She hadn't seen him at the party last night, hadn't even known he was back in the city. He'd been in Miami for the last 2 years, running a nightclub that was definitely a front for money laundering, but also actually a successful nightclub. He looked older, 26 now, not the kid she'd left behind. His hair was longer, bleached almost white, and he had new tattoos crawling up his neck. Sarah, he said when she entered. Luca, that was all. 8 years and that's all they had. He'd been 18 when she left, still figuring out who he was, and she'd abandoned him to this world. She could see the resentment in his eyes, buried under practiced indifference. Now that we're all here, Lorenzo said, let's talk about last night. Someone poisoned a woman at my daughter's engagement party. That's an act of war unless we figure out who did it and why. Bratva, Dominic suggested. He was 50, gray-bearded, with hands like hammers. They deny it. So does everyone else. Maybe they're lying. Or maybe it's internal, Marco said, looking around the table. Someone in our organization who's not happy about the Moretti alliance. Several heads turned. Suspicious looks exchanged. You accusing someone? Santiago asked. He was young, only 30, ambitious, dangerous. I'm stating facts. Not everyone at this table was thrilled when Seraphina agreed to marry Cassian Moretti. And why would we be? Luca spoke up, his voice sharp. The Morettis have been our enemies for 8 years. 8 years of war, of lost territory, of dead soldiers. And now suddenly we're supposed to play nice because Sarah comes home and decides to be queen. The table went quiet. Careful, Lorenzo said softly. No, I'm done being careful. Luca stood, and Seraphina saw how tall he'd gotten, how broad. He wasn't a kid anymore. You want to talk about betrayal? Let's talk about betrayal. Sarah abandoned us, left us to fight while she played housewife in Manhattan, and now she waltzes back and we're supposed to bow down? Rearrange our entire operation for her revenge plot. Luca, Seraphina started. Don't. You don't get to Luca me. You don't get to play big sister after 8 years of nothing. His face was red now, anger she didn't know he'd been carrying spilling out. You want to marry Moretti? Fine. But don't pretend you're doing it for the family. You're doing it because your husband cheated and you need to win. This is about your ego, not our empire. Lorenzo slammed his hand on the table, the sound like a gunshot. Enough. Is it, though? Because I don't think it is. I think we need to talk about this. About whether Sarah's even fit to... I said enough. Lorenzo's voice filled the room, terrible and absolute. You will respect your sister or you will leave this table. Choose now. Luca stared at his father, jaw working. Then he looked at Seraphina, and the hurt in his eyes was so raw it physically hurt to see. I choose to leave, he said quietly. He walked out and the door slammed behind him. The room stayed silent for a long moment. Then Lorenzo sighed, suddenly looking every one of his 63 years. Continue. But Seraphina couldn't focus on the rest of the meeting. She kept seeing Luca's face, kept hearing his words. He was right. She had abandoned him, abandoned all of them. And now she was back making demands, rearranging their world for her own purposes. Maybe she was exactly as selfish as Sebastian always said. The meeting ended with no clear answers. They'd increased security, started internal investigations, reached out to every allied family for information. But they were chasing shadows, and everyone knew it. Seraphina found Luca in the garden behind the estate, sitting on the stone bench near their mother's roses. She'd planted them the year before she died, hybrid tea roses in deep red that bloomed even in November. Go away, Luca said, without looking up. We need to talk. No, we don't. Seraphina sat anyway, leaving space between them. You're right, about everything you said in there. I did abandon you. I don't want your apology. Good, because I wasn't apologizing. I was agreeing. She picked a rose, ignoring the thorns that bit into her palm. I left because I couldn't breathe here. Because every day in this house felt like drowning. And I was selfish, and I was scared, and I ran. And now you're back because it's convenient. No, I'm back because I have nowhere else to go. She looked at him finally, at her little brother who wasn't little anymore. My marriage failed, my normal life failed, I failed, and this is the only place I know. Luca finally met her eyes. You think marrying Cassian Moretti is going to fix that? I think it's going to burn everything down so I can't run again. That's fucked up. Yeah, it really is. She held out the rose. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I need you to trust me, just for the next 2 weeks. After the wedding, if you still hate me, I'll understand. Luca looked at the rose, then at her hand bleeding where the thorns had cut. He took the rose carefully. I don't hate you, he said quietly. I just missed you, and I'm angry that I missed you. I know, I missed you too. They sat there for a while, not talking, just breathing the same air. It wasn't forgiveness, it wasn't resolution, but it was something. Finally, Luca stood. You should know, there's rumors. About the Morettis, about Cassian specifically. What kind of rumors? That he's been waiting for you, that he refused every marriage proposal from other families, every alliance. That he's been building his power base specifically to be strong enough to claim you when you came back. Seraphina's stomach twisted. That's insane. Is it? The guy proposes to you 2 hours after your engagement party starts. He had that ring ready. He had a speech prepared. Sarah, he's been planning this for years. That doesn't make sense. We were kids. What we had was what? Puppy love? A childhood crush? Luca shook his head. You know what I remember? I remember him beating the shit out of Tony Gallo when we were 15 because Tony said something about you. I remember him getting arrested for assault and spending 6 months in jail. For you. And when he got out, you were already gone. Seraphina stood too, her legs suddenly unsteady. He never told me that, because you left before he could. And then you married someone else. And he waited anyway. Luca touched her shoulder briefly. I'm telling you this because you're my sister, and I don't want you blindsided. Cassian Moretti doesn't want an alliance. He wants you. And men who want things that badly are dangerous. He walked away, leaving her alone in the garden with bleeding hands and a growing sense of dread. That night, the nightmares came back. The ones she'd had for years after London. The ones that finally stopped when she met Sebastian and convinced herself she could be someone new. But they were back now, vivid and terrible. She was 20 years old again, in that alley behind the club in Shoreditch, rain pouring down. The man's face in the streetlight, realizing too late what she was. The gun in her hand, still warm from firing. His blood spreading across wet concrete, mixing with rain, flowing toward the gutter. Her first kill. The one that made her run across an ocean and bury herself in someone else's life. She woke up gasping, tangled in sheets, her own screams still echoing in her ears. The clock said 3 a.m. The house was silent. Then her phone rang. Unknown number again. She stared at it for a long moment, then answered. Did you dream about him? The distorted voice asked. About the man in London? How do you I know everything, Seraphina. I know why you ran. I know what you're hiding. And soon everyone else will know too. Who are you? Someone who wants what you have. Someone who's tired of waiting. A pause. The wedding is a mistake. Cancel it, or more people will die. Is that a threat? It's a promise. Vanessa was just the beginning. Next time, it'll be someone you actually care about. Your brother, maybe. Or your father. Or Cassian himself. How many bodies are you willing to stack up for this crown you're chasing? I'm not chasing anything. Liar. You're chasing redemption. You think if you become queen of this city, it'll erase what you did in London. It'll make you clean again. But blood doesn't wash off, Seraphina. It just spreads. The line went dead. Seraphina sat in the dark, phone still pressed to her ear, listening to silence. Then she got dressed, jeans, boots, leather jacket, tucked her gun into her waistband, walked out of the estate without telling anyone where she was going. She drove into Manhattan, back to the penthouse she'd shared with Sebastian, used her key even though she probably shouldn't have. The lights were off. The place looked abandoned, dishes in the sink, mail piled by the door, that lived-in mess that comes from someone falling apart. Sebastian, she called out. No answer. She checked the bedroom. Empty. The bathroom. Empty. Was starting to think he'd actually taken her advice and left the city when she heard it. A sound from the office. Shuffling papers. She pushed the door open, gun already in her hand. Sebastian sat at his desk surrounded by file folders and laptop screens, looking like he hadn't slept in 3 days, which he probably hadn't. His eyes were bloodshot, his hair was greasy, and he'd grown the beginning of a beard that made him look 10 years older. "You came back," he said, not surprised. Not even scared of the gun. "Someone's threatening my family." "And you thought it was me?" He laughed, and it sounded broken. "Sarah, I'm a lot of things, but I'm not a killer. Someone killed Vanessa." "I know, I was there." He rubbed his face. "And before you ask, no, it wasn't me. I know how it looks. Timing's convenient, right? Get rid of the mistress. Make it look like you're mob enemies. But I didn't do it." Seraphina lowered the gun slightly, studying his face. He looked destroyed, genuinely destroyed. Either he was an incredible actor or he was telling the truth. "What are you doing here?" she asked. "Why didn't you run? Where would I go? You weren't lying. Every account I have is frozen. Every contact I call goes to voicemail. I tried to book a flight, and my credit cards were all declined." He gestured at the files spread across his desk. "So I've been going through everything. Every business deal I ever made, every meeting you facilitated, trying to figure out who I actually am without you propping me up. And I'm nothing. I'm a guy who was good at pitches and bad at loyalty. That's it. That's my whole identity." He looked up at her, and there were tears in his eyes. "You want to know the worst part? I didn't even love her, Vanessa. I didn't love her, and I threw away 8 years for her anyway." "Then why did you do it? Because you were perfect? Because you never needed me for anything? Because every day I woke up next to you and thought, how long until she figures out I'm ordinary?" He wiped his eyes roughly. "I cheated because I was weak. Because some mediocre girl thought I was special, and that felt good. That felt like something I deserved instead of something I was stealing." Seraphina holstered her gun. She didn't feel satisfied, didn't feel vindicated, just tired. "You should leave the city anyway," she said. "Even if you didn't kill her, someone did, and they might come after you next. Let them. Maybe I deserve it. Self-pity doesn't look good on you. Neither does vengeance, but here we are." Sebastian stood, swaying slightly. When was the last time he'd eaten? "For what it's worth, I am sorry. Really, genuinely sorry. And I hope you're happy with him. With Cassian. I hope he treats you better than I did." "He won't. He's worse than you in every way that matters." "Then why marry him?" "Because he's honest about what he is. And right now, I need honesty more than I need goodness." She left Sebastian there in his empty office, drowning in files that proved his inadequacy. Drove back to the estate as the sun was rising, painting the sky in shades of blood and gold. Marco was waiting for her in the driveway, arms crossed, looking furious. "Where the hell were you? Your father's been calling for an hour." "I had an errand." "An errand? While someone's threatening the family, while we're on lockdown, you go for a drive without security, without telling anyone?" He grabbed her arm. "You trying to get yourself killed?" "Maybe. That's not funny. I'm not joking." She pulled free and headed for the house. "Where's my father?" "War room. We got a lead on the poisoning." The war room was actually the basement. Concrete walls, no windows, soundproofed. A dozen screens showed security feeds from around the city. Lorenzo stood at the central table, looking at photographs. When Seraphina entered, he didn't ask where she'd been, just pointed at the photos. "Recognize her?" Seraphina looked closer. A woman, late 30s, dark hair, expensive clothes. She was caught on camera at the Opera House last night, near the bar where Vanessa got her champagne. Then another photo, same woman leaving through the service entrance. "No. Should I?" "Her name is Valentina Russo. She works for the Calabrian family." "The Calabrians?" Seraphina frowned. "They're small time. Drugs and gambling mostly. Why would they make a move against us?" "They wouldn't. Not alone." Lorenzo pulled up another photo, Valentina meeting with someone in a parking garage. The angle was bad, the second person's face hidden by shadow. But she's been spotted meeting with this person 3 times in the last month. We can't get a clear image. So we find Valentina and ask her. Already on it. Marco's team tracked her to a hotel in Brooklyn. We move tonight. Seraphina nodded, studying the photos again. Something about them nagged at her. The body language between Valentina and the mystery person. They stood close, comfortable. This wasn't a business arrangement. This was personal. I'm coming with you tonight, she said. Like hell you are. It's my engagement party that got shot up. My life someone's threatening. I'm coming. Lorenzo looked at her for a long moment, then sighed. You're as stubborn as your mother. Fine. But you stay in the car unless I say otherwise. Deal. They moved at midnight. 4 cars, 20 men, all armed and wearing enough firepower to start a small war. Seraphina rode with Marco and 2 others, watching the city slide past the windows. Brooklyn streets getting narrower, buildings getting older, the gentrification fading into something raw and real. The hotel was a dump. 3 stories of broken neon and crumbling brick, the kind of place you paid cash and didn't leave your real name. Marco's team had confirmed Valentina was in room 207, second floor facing the alley. They parked 2 blocks away and waited for Lorenzo's signal. It came at 12:47 a.m. Go. They moved fast and quiet, spreading out around the building, cutting off escape routes. Marco went up the front stairs with 6 men. Seraphina stayed in the car like she'd promised, watching through binoculars. Then the shooting started. Not from the hotel, from across the street. Muzzle flashes lit up a rooftop, bullets slamming into Marco's team. Men dropped, screaming. Others returned fire, chaos exploding in the quiet street. Ambush! Someone shouted through the radio. It was a trap. They'd been set up. Seraphina watched Marco take cover behind a car, blood streaming from his shoulder. Watched Lorenzo's men try to retreat while bullets tore through metal and brick and flesh. Then she saw her. Valentina, running out the back of the hotel, heading for the alley. Seraphina didn't think, just moved. Gun in hand, out of the car, sprinting across the street while bullets whined past her head. She hit the alley at a dead run, saw Valentina 50 feet ahead, and fired. The shot went wide, sparking off brick. Valentina spun, fired back. The bullet passed so close to Seraphina's face she felt the heat. They both ran. The alley twisted, opened into a loading area behind a restaurant. Dumpsters and pallets, and the smell of rotting food. Valentina vaulted a chain-link fence. Seraphina followed, her boots slipping on wet metal, but she made it over. They were in a parking lot now, empty, nowhere to hide. Valentina stopped running and turned, gun raised. Seraphina stopped too, 20 feet between them, both breathing hard. Don't, Seraphina said. Just tell me who hired you. You really don't know. Valentina smiled, and it was sad. God, you really don't see it. See what? You think this is about you? About your engagement? Valentina laughed. This is bigger than you, princess. This is about old debts coming due. What debts? Ask your father. Ask him what he did in London 8 years ago. Ask him who he killed to protect you. Seraphina's blood went cold. What are you talking about? You killed that man in the alley, but he wasn't alone. He had a brother, and that brother has been waiting a long time for revenge. Behind Valentina, a car turned into the parking lot, headlights blazing. It accelerated toward them, engine screaming. Valentina fired at Seraphina, but missed, the shot going high. The car hit Valentina at 40 miles an hour, throwing her 30 feet like a rag doll. She hit the pavement and didn't move again. The car stopped. The driver's door opened. Cassian Moretti stepped out, adjusting his suit jacket like he'd just come from dinner. You okay? He asked calmly. Seraphina stared at him, at the dead woman, at the car that had killed her right before she could reveal who was behind everything. Did you? Her voice failed. She tried again. Did you just kill our only lead? I saved your life. You're welcome. We needed her alive. She was about to shoot you, Sarah. What did you want me to do? Not kill her. We needed answers. Cassian walked over to Valentina's body, checked for a pulse, found nothing. She's got a phone. We'll get answers from that. He pulled a phone from Valentina's jacket, wiped the blood off on his pants, and pocketed it. Then He looked at Seraphina, and his eyes were very dark in the harsh streetlight. "You shouldn't have run off alone," he said. "The car, the ambush. It was all for you. They wanted to draw you out." "How did you even know I was here? I'm always watching you." He said it simply, like it was obvious. "Have been for 8 years. Did you really think I'd lose track of you now?" And there it was, Luca's warning. The confirmation that Cassian Moretti hadn't just been waiting. He'd been stalking, watching, planning. "That's insane," Seraphina whispered. "That's love." He moved closer, and she couldn't make herself back away. "You want to know why I proposed to you in front of everyone? Why I had the ring ready? Because I knew. The second you came home, I knew you'd eventually be mine. It was just a matter of time. I'm not a thing to be owned. No, you're a queen to be claimed, and I've been preparing to claim you since the day you left." His hand came up, fingers brushing her cheek, smearing blood she didn't know was there. "We're going to rule this city together, Sarah. We're going to burn it down and rebuild it in our image. And anyone who gets in our way dies, starting with whoever killed Vanessa." Sirens wailed in the distance. The ambush had attracted attention. They needed to move. Cassian kept his hand on Seraphina's face, his touch too gentle for a man who'd just committed vehicular homicide. 2 weeks, he said. Then you're mine forever. No more running, no more hiding. Just us and the crown we're going to build from bones. He pulled away, got back in his car, and drove off like nothing had happened. Seraphina stood alone in the parking lot with a dead woman and the terrible understanding that she'd just sold herself to something much worse than a cheating husband. She'd sold herself to obsession. And the wedding was in 13 days. Seraphina stood in this parking lot for 3 minutes after Cassian drove away, staring at Valentina's broken body while her brain tried to process what had just happened. The sirens were getting closer, maybe 5 blocks out now, wailing through Brooklyn streets. She needed to move, needed to run, but her legs wouldn't work. Cassian had been watching her for 8 years. 8 years of her life in London, her marriage to Sebastian, every moment she'd thought she was free. He'd been there in the shadows, waiting, planning. The idea made her skin crawl, made her want to scrub herself raw, but there was no time for that now. Marco's voice cracked through the radio on her hip. "Princess, where the fuck are you?" She pressed the button. "Parking lot behind the diner, 2 blocks east." "Are you hit?" "No." "Valentina." Seraphina looked at the body again. Blood was pooling around Valentina's head, black in the streetlight. "Dead. Cassian killed her." Silence on the radio, then, "Copy. Stay there. We're coming." They extracted her 90 seconds before the cops arrived. Marco and 2 others, pulling her into a van and speeding away while police lights painted the neighborhood blue and red. No one spoke during the drive. Marco's shoulder was wrapped in bloody gauze, his face gray with pain, but he kept one hand on his gun and his eyes on the street, watching for tails. Back at the estate, Lorenzo was waiting in the war room, pacing like a caged animal. When Seraphina walked in, he stopped and just looked at her, really looked, the way he used to when she was little and came home with scraped knees from climbing trees she shouldn't have climbed. "You're bleeding," he said. She touched her face. Her hand came away red. Not her blood, Valentina's, from when Cassian touched her. She wiped it on her jeans. "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You ran into an ambush alone, our only lead is dead, and Cassian Moretti apparently killed her right in front of you." Lorenzo's voice was getting louder with each word. "What the hell were you thinking?" "I was thinking we needed answers, and now we have a corpse instead." He slammed his hand on the table, making the screens jump. "This is exactly why I didn't want you involved. You're reckless. You've always been reckless. Then maybe you shouldn't have raised me in this world." The words came out sharper than she meant, 8 years of resentment riding underneath them. "Maybe if you'd let me be normal, let me be soft, I wouldn't know how to chase down killers in alleyways." "You were never soft." Lorenzo's voice dropped, dangerous and quiet. "You were 8 years old the first time you asked me to teach you how to shoot. 9 when you asked to sit in on business meetings. You chose this world, Seraphina. I just gave you the tools to survive it. And look how well that turned out." Marco cleared his throat from where he stood by the door, his good arm crossed over his bandaged shoulder. "Maybe we should focus on what Valentina said before she died. About London. About old debts." The room went very cold. Lorenzo's face shuddered completely, every emotion draining away until he looked like a statue. What exactly did she say? Seraphina met her father's eyes. She said to ask you what you did in London 8 years ago. To ask you who you killed to protect me. She was lying, trying to turn you against me. Was she though? Because she seemed pretty fucking specific. Seraphina moved closer, studying Lorenzo's face for cracks. What happened after I left London? After I killed that man in the alley? Nothing happened. You called me. I sent people to clean it up. End of story. Don't lie to me. Not now. Not about this. I'm Papa? She used the word she hadn't used in years, the one from childhood, and watched him flinch. Please. Someone is threatening our family, killing people at my engagement party, setting up ambushes, and they're doing it because of something that happened in London. I need to know what. Lorenzo stared at her for a long moment. Then he walked to the bar cart and poured himself 3 fingers of scotch, drank it in one swallow, poured another. The man you killed, he said finally, not looking at her. His name was Daniel Costello. Irish mob, lower-level enforcer. He was drunk, grabbed you outside that club, tried to... He stopped, his jaw working. You defended yourself. Clean shoot, self-defense, no question. I know that part. What happened after? After I sent a team to handle the body. They were supposed to make it look like a robbery gone wrong, dump him in the Thames. Case closed. Lorenzo drank again. But Daniel had a brother, Killian Costello, and Killian didn't accept the story. He knew his brother was killed execution style, knew it wasn't random, so he started asking questions. And you killed him too? No. Lorenzo turned to face her. I tried to pay him off. Offered him £2 million to drop it and forget your name. He took the money. I thought that was the end of it. But it wasn't. But it wasn't, Lorenzo confirmed. Because 6 months later, Killian came back. Said he'd spent the money tracking you down, finding out who you really were. Said he wanted revenge. Said he'd kill you, kill me, kill everyone in the DeLuca family until his brother's death was avenged. Seraphina's hands were shaking. She shoved them in her pockets. So what did you do? What I had to do. What any father would do. Lorenzo set his glass down carefully, like it might shatter. I invited Killian to a meeting, told him we could work something out, and when he showed up, you killed him. I killed him, put 3 bullets in his chest and dropped him in the Atlantic with concrete shoes. Lorenzo's voice was flat, emotionless, reciting facts. Then I found everyone who knew about it, his friends, his crew, anyone who might come looking, and I paid them off or scared them off or buried them. Whatever it took to make sure no one would ever connect you to Daniel Costello's death. The room spun. Seraphina grabbed the edge of the table to steady herself. How many people did you kill? Does it matter? Yes. 7? He said it simply. 7 people died to keep you safe, and I'd do it again. I'd kill 70 if that's what it took. Jesus Christ, Marco muttered from the doorway. Seraphina couldn't breathe. 7 people. 7 lives ended because she'd defended herself in an alley, because her father loved her too much, because violence was always their first solution. So Valentina was telling the truth. Someone from London has been waiting 8 years for revenge. It appears so. Who? If you killed everyone connected to Killian? I thought I did. Obviously, I missed someone. Lorenzo pulled out his phone, started typing. I'll reach out to our contacts in the UK, see who's still alive, who might have had a connection we didn't know about. It won't matter. Seraphina's voice came from far away. They're here. They're in our organization. Close enough to poison Vanessa, close enough to set up that ambush tonight. This isn't some Irish mobster coming for revenge. This is someone we trust. The implications settled over the room like ash. Marco spoke first. Internal investigation. We question everyone, top to bottom. Someone's been feeding information to this Killian Connect. Someone who knew about the engagement party, knew you'd chase Valentina tonight. Do it, Lorenzo ordered. I want eyes on everyone. Phones tapped, movements tracked, bank accounts analyzed. Someone in this family is a traitor, and we're going to find them. What about the wedding? Seraphina asked. We can't go forward if there's a mole in the organization. We have to go forward. Canceling now makes us look weak, makes the alliance look unstable. We proceed as planned, but we tighten security. No one gets within 100 feet of you or Cassian without being triple-checked. Seraphina thought about Cassian's face in the parking lot, the way he'd looked at her like she was already his. The phone he'd taken from Valentina's body, the evidence they needed that was now in his possession. "I need to talk to Cassian," she said. "He took Valentina's phone, whatever leads she had, whatever contacts, it's all on there. I'll arrange a meeting for tomorrow." "No, tonight. Now." She was already moving toward the door. "We don't have time to wait." Seraphina says, "If someone's planning to hit the wedding, we have less than 2 weeks to stop them. Every hour we waste is another hour for them to prepare." She looked back at her father, at the man who'd killed 7 people to protect her, and felt something crack inside her chest. "I'll be back before dawn." She left before he could argue. The Moretti estate was across the river in New Jersey, 40 minutes from the DeLuca compound. Seraphina drove herself this time, refusing Marco's offer of security, needing to be alone with her thoughts. The roads were empty at 3 a.m., just her and the occasional truck making late-night deliveries. She kept the radio off, drove in silence, tried not to think about 7 bodies sinking into the Atlantic, concrete pulling them down into cold and dark, and forgetting. The Moretti gates were similar to the DeLuca gates, iron and cameras and dogs that barked when her headlights swept across them. But the house itself was different. Where the DeLuca estate was old stone and tradition, the Moretti compound was modern glass and steel, all sharp angles and floor-to-ceiling windows that probably cost more than most people's houses. Guards stopped her at the gate. She rolled down her window. "Seraphina DeLuca to see Cassian Moretti." The guard spoke into his radio, waited, then nodded. "He's expecting you." Of course he was. He was always expecting her. The gates opened and she drove through, parking in the circular driveway in front of the house. The front door opened before she could knock, and Cassian stood there in sweatpants and a t-shirt, barefoot, looking like he'd just rolled out of bed, but his eyes were alert, predatory. "Couldn't stay away?" he asked. "I need that phone. Come in." He stepped aside and she entered a foyer that was all white marble and modern art, and a staircase that seemed to float without support. "Want a drink?" "I want the phone." "Patience, Sarah." He led her through the house to what was probably supposed to be a living room but looked more like a museum, uncomfortable furniture arranged around sculptures she didn't recognize. He poured 2 whiskeys from a crystal decanter, handed her one. "Sit." "I'd rather stand." "Sit." Not a request. A command. She sat. He sat across from her, close enough that their knees almost touched. "You know what I realized tonight?" Cassian swirled his whiskey. "You look exactly the same as you did when we were 16. Same fire in your eyes. Same way of holding yourself like you're ready to fight anyone who looks at you wrong." "The phone, Cassian." "I'm getting to it." He took a sip, savoring it. "You know what else I realized? You came here alone. No security, no backup, no one knowing where you are. That's either very brave or very stupid." "I'm not scared of you." "You should be." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and his face was suddenly inches from hers. "You know what I've been doing for 8 years? While you were playing house in Manhattan, pretending to be normal? I've been building an empire, expanding territory, eliminating rivals, consolidating power. And you know why? Enlighten me." "But..." "Because I knew eventually you'd come back, and when you did, I wanted to be strong enough to keep you." His hand came up, fingers brushing her cheek like he had in the parking lot, and she forced herself not to flinch. "You think your father's scary? You think Lorenzo DeLuca is the most dangerous man on the East Coast? He's not. I am, and I built all of it for you." "That's insane." "That's devotion." He pulled back, drained his whiskey, set the glass down with a sharp click. "The phone is upstairs in my office. I'll take you to it. But first, I need you to understand something." "Understand what?" "That you're mine now. No more running, no more hiding. The wedding happens in 12 days, and after that, you belong to me. Completely. Your body, your loyalty, your future. All of it mine." Seraphina stood. "I don't belong to anyone. We'll see." He stood too, and even in bare feet he was taller than her, broad enough to block the light. "Come on, let's get you that phone so you can pretend you still have control over any of this." They went upstairs, more floating stairs, more modern art, more glass. His office was at the end of the hall, and it was nothing like Lorenzo's warm wood and leather. This was cold and minimal. A glass desk with a single laptop, bookshelves full of first editions, windows overlooking the city, lights twinkling like dying stars. Cashin pulled Valentina's phone from a desk drawer and tossed it to her. She caught it reflexively. "It's locked," he said, "but I've got a guy who can crack it. Should have access by tomorrow afternoon." "I'll take it to my guy." "No, you won't." He moved around the desk, trapping her against the windows. "Because if there's something on that phone that you don't want me to see, I'm going to see it anyway. We're partners now, Sarah. No secrets. Except all your secrets. Like watching me for 8 years without my knowledge. That's not a secret. That's strategy." His smile was sharp. "And it worked, didn't it? You're here. You're wearing my ring. In less than 2 weeks, you'll be wearing my name. And if I change my mind, you won't. You sound pretty confident." "Because I know you. Better than you know yourself." He reached out, fingers wrapping around her wrist, thumb pressing against her pulse point. "Your heart's racing. You're scared, but you're also excited. You spent 8 years being someone else's wife, someone else's arm candy. You're tired of being small. You want to be dangerous again. You want to matter." He was right, and she hated him for it. "Give me the phone," she said quietly. "Kiss me first." "What?" "Kiss me. Right here, right now. Prove you're committed to this." His grip on her wrist tightened. "Or admit you're still running, still pretending, still trying to be someone you're not." Seraphina looked at him, really looked. At the boy she'd loved when she was too young to know what love cost. At the man he'd become, obsessive and possessive and exactly what she'd spent 8 years trying to escape. Then she kissed him. It wasn't soft, wasn't gentle. She grabbed his face and pulled him down and kissed him like she was trying to hurt him, teeth and anger and 8 years of running all compressed into one moment. He kissed back just as hard, hands in her hair, pulling her closer, swallowing her gasp. When they broke apart, they were both breathing hard. "There," she said. "Happy now?" "Happy. Getting there." He released her, stepped back, adjusted his shirt like nothing had happened. "Take the phone, crack it however you want, but tomorrow we meet to go over whatever you find, together." "Fine." "And Sarah?" He caught her arm as she headed for the door. "That kiss? That's how I know you're mine, because you kiss like you're trying to prove something, and the only person you're trying to prove it to is yourself." She yanked her arm free and walked out, taking the stairs 2 at a time, nearly running to her car. She was halfway back to the estate before she let herself feel it, the panic clawing up her throat, the certainty that she'd just made a deal with something much worse than the devil. Cassian Moretti didn't want a wife. He wanted a possession, and she'd just agreed to be it. By the time she got back to the estate, dawn was breaking, gray light turning the sky from black to bruised purple. She went straight to the war room where Lorenzo was still awake, still working, surrounded by files and photographs and the remnants of a pot of coffee. "You got it?" he asked when she entered. She held up Valentina's phone. "Locked, but I know someone who can crack it." "Who?" "Someone I haven't talked to in a long time." She pulled out her own phone, scrolled through old contacts until she found the name she wanted. "Someone who owes me a favor." The call connected on the 3rd ring. A woman's voice, raspy with sleep. "This better be important." "Diana, it's Seraphina." Silence. Then, "Holy shit! I thought you were dead." "Not yet." Seraphina looked at her father, then back at the phone. "I need your help. I've got a locked phone that I need cracked, and I need it done quietly. Can you do it?" "Probably. What's on it?" "Information about someone who's trying to kill me." "Jesus, Sarah, you know how to make an entrance." Diana sighed, and Seraphina could hear her moving, probably getting out of bed. "All right, bring it to the shop. I'll see what I can do. I'll be there in an hour." She hung up and looked at Lorenzo. "Diana Chen, best hacker on the East Coast. Used to work for us until she decided she'd rather be freelance." "I remember her. Smart girl. Smarter than she should be." Lorenzo stood, stretching, his back cracking. "Take Marco with you." "I don't need a babysitter." "You need someone watching your back." That ambush tonight was coordinated, professional. Whoever's behind this has resources, and they're not afraid to use them. He crossed to her, put his hands on her shoulders. I can't lose you again. Not to bullets, not to Cassian Moretti, not to anything. So take Marco or you don't go. She wanted to argue, wanted to tell him she could handle herself, but the look in his eyes stopped her. Raw fear, the kind she hadn't seen since her mother died, and Lorenzo had stood at the funeral with tears running down his face while he held a 9-year-old Seraphina's hand. Okay, she said quietly. Marco comes. Diana's shop was in Queens, tucked between a bodega and a laundromat, with a hand-painted sign that said, Chen Electronics, we fix everything. It looked sketchy as hell, which was probably the point. Diana didn't advertise. If you knew about her, you knew. If you didn't, you walked past like the place didn't exist. Marco waited in the car, his shoulder freshly bandaged, a new gun on his hip. You got 20 minutes. After that, I'm coming in. Deal. The shop was dark except for a single light in the back. Seraphina knocked and a lock clicked. The door opened 6 inches, chain still engaged, and Diana's face appeared in the gap. Asian features, purple hair cut short, piercings up both ears, eyes sharp enough to cut. Jesus, you look like hell, Diana said. It's been a rough week. I bet. The chain came off and the door opened. Get in here before someone sees you. The shop was exactly how Seraphina remembered. Workbenches covered in disassembled electronics, walls lined with tools she couldn't name, the smell of solder and coffee and something chemical. Diana locked the door behind them and gestured to a stool. Sit. Let me see the phone. Seraphina handed it over. Diana turned it over in her hands, examining it like a surgeon looking at a patient. iPhone 14, passcode protected, probably biometric as well. Where'd you get it? Off a dead woman. Of course you did. Diana carried the phone to her main workbench, plugged it into a laptop that was running programs Seraphina didn't recognize. This'll take a few minutes. Want to tell me why someone's trying to kill you? Long story. I've got time. So Seraphina told her. Not everything. Not London, not the 7 bodies in the Atlantic, but enough. Sebastian's betrayal. Coming home. The engagement to Cassian. Vanessa's poisoning. The ambush. Diana listened without interrupting, her fingers flying across the keyboard while programs ran and numbers scrolled. So let me get this straight, Diana said when Seraphina finished. You're marrying a psychopath who's been stalking you for 8 years, someone from your past is trying to kill you, and you think the answer is on a dead woman's phone? That's the summary, yeah. Sarah, I say this with love. You need therapy, not a hacker. I need both, but right now I'll settle for whatever's on that phone. Fair enough. Diana's laptop beeped. And we're in. Jesus, that was almost too easy. She didn't even have 2-factor authentication enabled. What's on it? Diana started scrolling, her expression darkening with each swipe. Oh, this is bad. This is really bad. How bad? Like, your entire world is about to explode bad. Diana turned the laptop so Seraphina could see. Look at her messages. Seraphina leaned closer. Text after text, all from the same contact, listed only as K. Had to be Killian or someone connected to him. But it wasn't the name that made her stomach drop. It was the content. Wedding guests confirmed. Security protocols attached. Personal schedules included. She'll be alone in the bridal suite from 2 to 3 p.m. Window of opportunity. Father will be distracted during toasts. 45-second window to move. Brother confirmed unreliable. Not a threat. Every detail of the wedding, every schedule, every security measure. Things only someone in the DeLuca organization would know. There's more, Diana said quietly. She pulled up a series of photos. Surveillance shots. Look at the dates. The photos showed Seraphina getting coffee, walking to her car, sitting in restaurants. Dated over the last year, long before she'd come home. Before Sebastian's affair. Before everything. Someone had been watching her for months. Scroll down, Diana said. More photos. But these weren't of Seraphina. They were of Cassian, meeting with people she didn't recognize, accepting envelopes, shaking hands with men in expensive suits, and in one photo, clear as day, Cassian meeting with Valentina Russo in the parking garage. The same meeting Lorenzo's people had photographed, the same mystery person whose face they couldn't see. It had been Cassian all along. Seraphina's vision blurred. The room tilted. She grabbed the edge of the workbench to keep from falling. "Sarah?" Diana's voice came from far away. "Sarah, breathe. Just breathe." But she couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't process what she was seeing. Cassian had hired Valentina. Cassian had set up the poisoning, the ambush, all of it. The man she was supposed to marry in 12 days was the one trying to kill her. "There's more," Diana said, and her voice was gentle, like she was breaking bad news to a child. "Messages between Cassian and this K person. You need to read them." She pulled up a message thread that made everything worse. "The DeLuca girl is the key. Once she's dead, Lorenzo falls apart. The empire crumbles. Then it's all ours." "What about the engagement? If I'm supposed to marry her—" "You won't have to. She dies at the wedding. Tragic accident. Everyone sees the Irish connection. War breaks out between DeLucas and Costello's people. You play the devastated fiancé. Moretti's absorbed DeLuca territory during the chaos. We split it 60-40. 60-40? We agreed on 50-50. You're getting a wedding and a reputation boost. That's worth the extra 10%. Take it or I'll find someone else." The messages went on. Pages of them. Planning her death. Planning to use her murder to start a war. Planning to carve up her father's empire like a fucking pizza. And Cassian had agreed to all of it. The man who said he loved her. The man who said he'd waited 8 years. The man who'd kissed her 3 hours ago like she was oxygen. He was going to kill her at their wedding and then profit from it. "Sarah." Diana grabbed her shoulders, forced her to focus. "Sarah, look at me. You need to get out of here, right now. If Cassian finds out you have this phone, if he knows you've seen these messages, he'll kill me sooner." Seraphina's voice came out flat. "Dead. He'll kill me and make it look like an accident, and no one will ever know." "So you run. You get in that car with Marco and you drive until you hit Canada or Mexico or fucking Antarctica. You disappear." "I can't." "Why the hell not?" "Because this K person, Killian or whoever, they're in my organization. They have access to my family. If I run, they'll just kill everyone I love, and I won't be there to stop it." Seraphina straightened, forcing her spine to lock, forcing the panic down. "I need copies of everything on this phone. Messages, photos, call logs, everything." "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to the wedding." She said it calmly, like she was discussing dinner plans. "I'm going to smile and put on a white dress and walk down that aisle. And then I'm going to burn Cassian Moretti's entire world to the ground." "That's suicide. That's survival." Seraphina looked at Diana, at her old friend who'd gotten out of this life and stayed out. "How fast can you get me those copies?" 10 minutes, but Sarah says it. No buts, no arguments. Just give me the files and let me do what I do best." Diana stared at her for a long moment, then shook her head and turned back to the laptop. "You always were the crazy one." While Diana worked, Seraphina called Lorenzo. He answered on the first ring. "What did you find?" "Everything. And it's worse than we thought." She took a breath. "Cassian's behind it. All of it. He's been working with the Costello connection, planning to kill me at the wedding and use the chaos to take over our territory." Silence on the other end. Long and terrible. Then, very quietly, "Are you certain?" "I have messages, photos, proof. Diana's making copies now. Come home, right now. We'll figure out—" "No!" She cut him off. "We can't let Cassian know we know. If he suspects anything, he'll move up the timeline, hit us before we're ready. We need to keep playing along." "Seraphina, if what you're saying is true, you cannot marry that man. I won't let you walk into a death trap." "I'm not going to marry him. I'm going to destroy him." Her hands were steady now, her voice clear. "But I need your help. I need you to trust me. Always." "Then listen carefully." She laid out the plan while Diana worked, while the sun rose higher, while the city woke up and started its day completely unaware that a war was being planned in a little electronics shop in Queens. Lorenzo listened without interrupting, and when she finished, he was quiet for a long time. "That's risky," he said finally. "That's necessary. If anything goes wrong, it won't, but if it does, I need you to promise me something. Anything. If I die, you burn the Moretti Empire to the ground. You salt the earth. You make sure no one ever speaks Cassian's name again without spitting. Seraphina, promise me. I promise. His voice cracked. But you're not going to die. I won't allow it. We'll see. She hung up as Diana turned with a flash drive. Everything's on here, encrypted. Password is your mother's birthday. Seraphina took the drive, held it like it was made of dynamite, which, in a way, it was. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Wait until you survive the next 12 days. Diana walked her to the door, unlocked it, then grabbed Seraphina's arm. For what it's worth, you deserve better than this. Better than Sebastian, better than Cassian, better than all of it. Maybe, but better doesn't exist in my world. Only survival. Then survive. And when this is over, get the hell out, for real this time. Seraphina left the shop and got in the car with Marco, who took one look at her face and started driving without asking questions. She stared out the window at Queens rolling past, thinking about Cassian's hands in her hair, his mouth on hers, the way he'd said, "You're mine," like it was a fact instead of a threat. He'd been planning to kill her the whole time, and she'd kissed him anyway. The next 11 days were the longest of Seraphina's life. She played the part perfectly, the excited bride-to-be, finalizing flower arrangements and seating charts while secretly coordinating a counter-operation that would either save her life or end it spectacularly. She met with Cassian every day, discussing wedding details while he smiled and touched her waist and probably mentally counted down the hours until he could kill her. She smiled back, let him touch her, kissed him when he expected it, and every night she went home and planned his destruction. Lorenzo worked his contacts, quietly moving loyal soldiers into position. Marco coordinated with trusted lieutenants, people who'd been with the family for decades and would die before betraying them. Luca, surprisingly, threw himself into the planning with vicious enthusiasm. Turned out he was very good at improvised explosives, a skill Seraphina decided not to ask about. Diana hacked everything, Cassian's phones, his emails, his bank accounts. She traced the money trail between him and this K person, following it through shell companies and offshore accounts until they had a complete picture of the conspiracy. Cassian had promised K, identified now as Killian Costello's younger cousin Rory, 60% of DeLuca territory. Drug routes, gambling operations, legitimate businesses, all of it. The wedding assassination was just the opening move. The plan was to frame the Irish, start a war, and let the DeLucas and the Costello organization bleed each other dry while the Morettis swooped in to claim the spoils. It was a good plan. Would have worked too if Cassian hadn't gotten cocky, if he'd been content to have Valentina work alone. But he'd needed to control everything personally, needed to meet with her, needed to leave a trail. Men like Cassian always did. They were so used to winning that they forgot to cover their tracks. The night before the wedding, Seraphina couldn't sleep. She lay in her old bedroom, staring at the ceiling, listening to the house settle around her. Tomorrow she'd put on a white dress. Tomorrow she'd walk down an aisle. Tomorrow she'd either win everything or lose it all. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost ignored it. Then curiosity won. Hello? Tomorrow's the big day. Rory Costello's voice, undisguised this time. Young and Irish and full of venom. You excited to die, princess? About as excited as you'll be when I prove you're working with Cassian and destroy both of you. Silence. Then, you're bluffing. Am I? Want to bet your life on it? More silence. She could hear him breathing, could practically feel him recalculating. You have no proof, he said finally. I have all the proof. Messages between you and Cassian, financial records, photos, voice recordings, everything. She kept her voice light, conversational. Here's how this is going to work. Tomorrow, you're going to call off whatever play you had planned. You're going to disappear, and if you're very lucky, I'll let you live. And if I don't, then I release everything to every family on the East Coast. The Irish will know you tried to manipulate them. The Morettis will know Cassian betrayed them, and you'll both be dead by sunset. She paused. Your choice. Run or die. She hung up before he could respond. 30 seconds later, her phone rang again. Cassian this time, his real number. What did you do? He sounded panicked. Actually panicked. Rory just called me freaking out, saying you have evidence, saying I know everything? Yeah, I do. Seraphina sat up, turned on the light. I know about the plan to kill me. I know about the territory split. I know about Valentina. All of it. Sarah, baby, listen. Don't. Don't baby me. Don't lie anymore. Her voice was ice. Here's what's going to happen. Tomorrow, you're going to show up to that wedding. You're going to smile for the cameras. And when I call you out in front of everyone, you're going to confess. Are you insane? I'll never... You will. Because if you don't, I'll release everything and let the families tear you apart. But if you confess, if you admit what you did, I'll let you live. You'll go to prison instead of a grave. That's the deal. You're bluffing. You loved me. You wouldn't... I never loved you. The words came out colder than she meant, true and terrible. I loved a memory of a boy who doesn't exist anymore. You killed that boy years ago. Now you're just a monster wearing his face. She hung up. Her phone immediately started ringing again, Cassian calling back, probably to threaten her, to tell her all the ways he'd hurt her if she didn't back down. She turned it off. Then she got dressed, grabbed the flash drive Diana had given her, and walked downstairs to the war room where Lorenzo, Marco, and Luca were waiting. Change of plans, she said. They know we know, which means tomorrow is going to be a bloodbath. Lorenzo stood. Then we cancel. Call off the wedding, go to ground, wait for... No, we go forward, but we go forward armed and ready. She plugged the flash drive into the computer and pulled up the files. I've got every message, every plan, every detail of what they were going to do. Tomorrow, in front of everyone who matters, I'm going to expose Cassian and Rory. I'm going to show the world exactly what they are. And when Cassian decides to shoot you instead of confessing, Luca asked, then you shoot him first. She looked at her brother. All of you. I need you armed, positioned, ready to move. If this goes sideways, if they try anything, you put them down. You're using yourself as bait, Marco said flatly. I'm using myself as the queen. She pulled up a seating chart, started marking positions. This is where Cassian will be. This is where Rory will probably try to position himself. This is where we put our people. By the time they realize they're surrounded, it'll be too late. They planned until dawn. Positions, contingencies, exit strategies. By the time the sun rose, painting the war room in shades of blood and gold, they had a plan that might actually work, or might get them all killed. Honestly, at this point, Seraphina didn't care which. The wedding was set for 6 p.m. at the Belladonna Opera House. Same place as the engagement party, same ballroom where Vanessa had died. Poetic, in a fucked-up way. Seraphina spent the morning getting ready, letting stylists do her hair and makeup while her mind ran through scenarios. Best case, Cassian confessed and went quietly. Worst case, 50 people died in a shootout and she was one of them. The dress was beautiful, white silk and lace, fitted through the bodice and flowing at the skirt, with a train that stretched 6 feet behind her. She looked like a princess, like prey dressed up for slaughter. Perfect. At 5:30, Lorenzo knocked on the bridal suite door. It's time. She opened it and he stopped, his eyes going bright with tears he'd never let fall. You look just like your mother on our wedding day. Did you love her? Really? More than my own life, more than this empire, more than everything. He offered his arm. That's why I understand what you're doing and why I'm terrified for you. I'm terrified too. She took his arm. But I'm more angry than scared, and anger's better fuel. They walked through the opera house, past guards who nodded, past bridesmaids who smiled, past all the expensive flowers and champagne and the illusion of celebration. The ballroom was packed. Every family, every ally, every player in the city, all here to witness the union of DeLuca and Moretti, all here to witness whatever the hell was about to happen instead. The orchestra started playing. The doors opened. Seraphina walked down the aisle on her father's arm, and every eye in the room turned to watch. She saw Luca positioned near the back, hand inside his jacket where she knew he kept his gun. Saw Marco by the side exit, his shoulder healed enough to aim. Saw Santiago and Dominic and all the other loyal soldiers placed exactly where she'd told them to be. And at the end of the aisle, waiting under an arch of white roses, stood Cassian Moretti in a tuxedo that probably cost $20,000, smiling like this was the happiest day of his life. When she reached him, Lorenzo kissed her cheek and whispered, "Last chance to run." I'm done running. He released her arm and stepped back. Seraphina climbed the 3 steps to the altar and took Cassian's hand. His palm was sweating. Good. He should be nervous. The officiant started talking, something about love and loyalty and till death do you part. Seraphina didn't hear any of it. She was watching Cassian's face, watching the micro-expressions that crossed it. Fear, calculation. The moment he decided he was going to do it anyway, going to go through with killing her even though his plan was blown, the officiant reached the vows. Cassian Moretti, do you take— Stop! Seraphina's voice cut through the room like a blade. Everyone froze. There's not going to be a wedding, she continued, her voice carrying to the back of the ballroom. Because the groom tried to have me killed. Gasps, murmurs. The room erupted into shocked whispers. Cassian's face went pale. Sarah, what are you— Don't. She pulled her hand free from his. I have proof. Messages between you and Rory Costello, planning my assassination. Photos of you meeting with Valentina Russo. Financial records showing you paid her to poison someone at our engagement party. All of it. You're insane. I'm done letting men lie to me. She turned to face the crowd, to face every powerful person in the city. Cassian Moretti and Rory Costello conspired to kill me at this wedding. They planned to frame the Irish, start a war between my family and the Costellos, and use the chaos to absorb our territory. She pulled out her phone, held it up. Everything's on here, every message, every plan, and I'm releasing it right now to everyone in this room. She hit send. 600 phones buzzed simultaneously. The room exploded into chaos. People pulling out phones, reading messages, their faces going from shocked to horrified to furious. Don Antonio Moretti stood, his face purple with rage, staring at his son like he'd never seen him before. Cassian grabbed Seraphina's arm. You stupid bitch! You just killed yourself! He pulled a gun from inside his jacket. Time slowed down. Seraphina saw the gun rise, saw his finger on the trigger, saw the moment he decided to do it, to shoot her right here in front of everyone. Consequences be damned. Then the back of his head exploded. Cassian dropped like a puppet with cut strings, blood and brain matter spraying across Seraphina's white dress. Behind where he'd been standing, Marco lowered his gun, smoke rising from the barrel. You said if it goes sideways, I shoot first, Marco said calmly. The ballroom erupted into screaming. People running, guards drawing weapons, families taking cover. Don Antonio was shouting orders in Italian. Someone was crying. The orchestra had stopped playing, but Seraphina could still hear music in her head, some phantom waltz that played while her world burned down. She looked down at Cassian's body, at the blood spreading across white marble, at the man who'd said he loved her bleeding out in his $20,000 tux. Then she looked up and saw him. Rory Costello, standing in the balcony with a rifle. Their eyes met. He smiled and pulled the trigger. The bullet hit Seraphina in the chest, punching through white silk and lace and the body armor she'd had sewn into the dress. Because she wasn't stupid, she'd known this was a possibility. The impact threw her backward, knocked the air from her lungs, sent her sprawling down the altar steps. She heard Lorenzo screaming her name, heard gunfire erupt as her family opened up on Rory's position, heard her own heartbeat, somehow louder than all of it, pounding in her ears like thunder. She couldn't breathe. The armor had stopped the bullet, but her ribs were broken, her chest on fire, every breath feeling like knives. She tried to sit up, and the world spun sickeningly. Marco was suddenly there, pulling her up, his face terrified in a way she'd never seen before. Sarah, look at me. You're okay. The vest caught it. You're okay. But she wasn't okay. Because even as Marco dragged her toward cover, even as gunfire tore through the opera house and people died and her family fought back, Seraphina realized the terrible truth. She'd won. She'd exposed Cassian. She'd survived the assassination attempt. She'd destroyed the conspiracy. But she was still here, still in this world of blood and bullets and bodies. Still exactly where she'd tried to escape 8 years ago. And this time, there was nowhere left to run. Pain was the first thing that made sense, white-hot and absolute, radiating from Seraphina's chest in waves that made her vision blur. She could taste copper, had bitten through her tongue when she fell, could feel Marco's hands under her arms, dragging her behind an overturned table while bullets punched through wood and marble around them. The opera house had become a war zone in the span of 30 seconds. Rory's rifle cracked again from the balcony, and someone screamed. One of the bridesmaids, Seraphina thought distantly, though she couldn't see through the chaos of bodies running, diving, scrambling for cover. The crystal chandeliers swung wildly, throwing fractured light across the carnage. Cashin's body lay where it had fallen, blood pooling around his head in an expanding circle that looked black in the shadows. "Stay down!" Marco shouted over the gunfire. His good hand pressed against her chest where the bullet had hit, checking for penetration even though they both knew the armor had held. "Can you breathe?" She tried. Gasped. Every breath felt like inhaling broken glass. Ribs. Broken. Better than dead. He shifted, bringing his gun up and firing 3 shots toward the balcony. "Lorenzo, we need to move her!" Her father's voice cut through the chaos from somewhere to her left. "South exit. Clear a path." More gunfire. Seraphina heard Luca's voice, younger and higher than the others, shouting coordinates like he was calling plays in a game. Heard the distinctive sound of Santiago's shotgun. Heard Dominic cursing in Spanish. Heard the wet impact of bullets finding flesh. Someone was crying. Multiple someones. The guests who weren't soldiers, the politicians, the businessmen, the wives and mistresses and children who'd come expecting champagne and romance. They were the ones dying fastest, caught in crossfire, trampled in the panic. She watched a woman in a green dress go down, blood spreading across silk like spilled wine. "How many shooters?" Marco demanded into his radio. 3 confirmed, came the response. Balcony, west entrance, and someone on the catwalk above the stage. "Rory's people," Seraphina managed. Her voice came out raspy. "He didn't come alone." Obviously, Marco pulled her to her feet and she nearly passed out from the pain. Her legs worked, but her chest felt like someone had taken a sledgehammer to it. The body armor had saved her life, but she'd trade every breath for unconsciousness right now. They moved toward the south exit in a crouch, using overturned tables and the grand piano for cover. Around them, the ballroom was destroying itself. Bullets shredded the oil paintings on the walls. Shattered champagne flutes sparkled on the floor like diamonds. That fucking white dress she wore kept catching on things, the train torn and bloody, slowing her down. She ripped it, just grabbed the fabric and tore it away from the bodice, leaving herself in what was essentially a short white slip and combat boots someone had made her wear under the dress for exactly this scenario. Better. She could move now. "East side clear." That was Luca's voice, breathless but steady. "We've got 3 families pinned down near the kitchen. Need someone to—" His voice cut off with a grunt that made Seraphina's blood freeze. "Luca!" she screamed. No answer. Marco grabbed her before she could run toward her brother's last position. "Don't! That's what they want! They want you out in the open! That's my brother, and he can handle himself. Move!" They reached the south exit. Lorenzo was there with 6 men forming a defensive perimeter, all of them firing in controlled bursts toward the balcony where Rory had disappeared. Her father's face was granite. No fear, no panic, just cold calculation and the kind of fury that made grown men piss themselves. Seraphina. He grabbed her shoulders, looked her over, saw the torn dress and the spreading bruise she could feel forming under the armor. "You need a hospital." "I need to find Luca." "Marco will find Luca. You're leaving. Now." He gestured and 2 of his men moved to flank her. "Take her to the secondary safe house. Don't stop. Don't let anyone follow." "No." She yanked away from the guards. "I'm not running while my family fights my battle. This isn't a battle. This is a massacre." Lorenzo pointed back at the ballroom where the gunfire was intensifying. Rory came with at least a dozen men, professional hitters. They're trying to kill everyone connected to either family. If you stay, they'll focus everything on you and more people die. If you leave, we can control the field. "He's right," Marco said, though he looked like he wanted to argue. "You're the target. Without you here, Rory loses his leverage." Seraphina looked past them into the ballroom, saw Don Antonio Moretti hunched behind an overturned buffet table, his security team returning fire. Saw bodies, so many bodies, some in tuxedos, some in evening gowns, all bleeding on white marble. Saw the future she'd tried to build literally burning around her, smoke beginning to rise from somewhere near the stage. And still no word from Luca. 5 minutes, she said. "I'm not leaving without knowing my brother's alive." "Seraphina." 5 minutes or I stay." She pulled the gun from Marco's ankle holster. He always kept a backup there, had since she was a kid, and checked the magazine. Full. Good. And if I stay, everyone dies trying to protect me. Your choice, Papa. Lorenzo stared at her. She watched the calculation in his eyes, the terrible mathematics of love versus strategy. Finally, he nodded once, sharp and angry. 5 minutes. Then you leave if I have to shoot you in the leg and drag you. He would too. She knew he would. Marco got on the radio. All units, status check. Who's got eyes on Luca? Static. Gunfire. Someone screaming. Then Luca's voice, strained but alive. I'm hit. North Gallery. Can't move. How bad? Lorenzo demanded. Leg. Through and through, I think. Lot of blood, though, and I've got... His voice cut out, came back. I've got a civilian with me. Woman, maybe 60. She's hurt bad. Seraphina was moving before anyone could stop her. Back into the ballroom, staying low, the gun heavy and familiar in her hand. She'd learned to shoot in this building when she was 8 years old. Her father used to rent it out for family events, and she'd spend hours in the basement range, learning trigger discipline and breathing control, and how to kill someone before they killed you. Funny how those lessons stuck. The North Gallery was on the second floor, accessible by stairs near the stage. She ran for it, keeping to the shadows, using the chaos as cover. A bullet spanged off the railing 2 inches from her hand. She didn't flinch. Didn't have time to flinch. Just kept moving. Behind her, Marco was cursing and running to keep up, his radio squawking with orders from Lorenzo to stop her, contain her, get her out before she got herself killed. Too late for that. She was already climbing the stairs, taking them 3 at a time despite the screaming pain in her ribs, despite the way each breath felt like drowning. The gallery was a narrow walkway overlooking the main floor, usually used by sound technicians during performances. Now it was a shooting gallery. Luca was pressed against the far wall, his leg dark with blood, one hand holding pressure on the wound, while the other held his gun. Next to him, a woman in a gold dress was slumped against the wall, blood bubbling from a hole in her chest. She was still breathing, but barely. Sarah, get down, Luca shouted. She dropped as a burst of automatic fire tore through the space where her head had been. The shooter was below them somewhere, near the orchestra pit. She couldn't see him, but she could track his position by the muzzle flash. Marco appeared beside her, breathing hard. You're insane. You know that? Been told. She aimed at where she'd seen the flash and fired 3 times. A grunt. A body falling. Maybe a hit, maybe just suppressing fire. Can you carry him? With one good arm and a death wish? Sure. Marco moved past her toward Luca, keeping low. Kid, how much blood have you lost? Enough to see God, but not enough to meet him. Luca's face was pale, his pupils dilated, shock setting in. The woman, Mrs. Albrecht, we have to help her. Seraphina crawled to the woman, felt for a pulse. It was there, but fading fast, irregular and weak. The chest wound was sucking air, punctured lung, maybe worse. She needed a hospital 5 minutes ago. I've got her, Seraphina said. Marco, get Luca out. You can barely walk yourself. I can walk better than either of them. She looked at the woman, Mrs. Albrecht, wife of some German industrialist, who'd probably come tonight expecting business networking, not a war. We don't leave people behind. Sarah, Luca started. Shut up and let Marco carry you before you bleed out on my watch. She got her arms under Mrs. Albrecht, felt the woman's weight, felt how little strength she had left in her own body after the armor caught that bullet. This was going to hurt. This was going to hurt so fucking much. She lifted. Her ribs screamed. Her vision went white at the edges. But she got Mrs. Albrecht up, got her moving, 1 step and then another toward the stairs. Behind her, Marco had Luca over his good shoulder in a fireman's carry, the kid's blood dripping down Marco's back. They made it halfway down the stairs before Rory Costello appeared at the bottom. He looked different than his photo. Younger, maybe 30, with the kind of face that belonged in a boy band, not a war zone. Blonde hair, green eyes, freckles across his nose. He wore tactical gear and carried an AR-15 like it was part of his body, and he was smiling. The princess herself, he said with an Irish lilt that would have been charming in any other context. I was hoping you'd survive that shot. Be ashamed to end this so quickly. Seraphina couldn't reach her gun. Not with Mrs. Albrecht's weight in her arms, not with her ribs making every movement agony. She stood there on the stairs, bleeding woman in her arms, and stared at the man who'd been planning her death for months. "Rory Costello," she said, "you're shorter than I expected." He laughed, actually laughed. "That's what you're going with? Height jokes? And here I thought you'd be begging for your life." "Why would I beg? You're going to kill me anyway." "True, but it's about the principle." He raised the rifle, aiming at her chest. "Any last words?" "Yeah." She met his eyes. "Duck." He frowned. "What?" The explosion came from below them, near the orchestra pit. Luca's improvised explosives, the ones he'd planted during the wedding setup, the ones Seraphina had authorized as a last resort. They detonated in sequence, 6 charges spaced around the ballroom's support columns, and the world became fire and noise and the sensation of falling. The stairs collapsed. Seraphina twisted midair, trying to protect Mrs. Albrecht, trying to land on something that wasn't her broken ribs. She hit hard on her shoulder, rolled, felt something in her body tear. Mrs. Albrecht landed beside her, still breathing somehow. Above them, Marco and Luca had grabbed the railing before it gave way, hanging from what was left of the second floor. And Rory was buried under a pile of rubble, just his arm visible, his rifle just out of reach. Seraphina crawled toward it. Her body was screaming at her to stop, to lay down, to give up. She ignored it, reached the rifle, grabbed it, turned it on the pile of rubble where Rory was trapped. He was still alive. She could see his eyes through a gap in the broken marble and wood, could see him looking at her with something like respect. "You crazy bitch," he said, blood on his teeth. "You blew up your own wedding." Wasn't much of a wedding anyway. She aimed at his head. "Any last words?" "Yeah." He smiled. "This wasn't about you. It was never about you." "What?" "Your father, Lorenzo De Luca. He killed my cousin 8 years ago. Killed 6 of his friends. Killed them and dumped them in the ocean like they were nothing." Rory coughed, red bubbling up. "I didn't want territory. I didn't want power. I wanted him to suffer. I wanted him to watch his daughter die the way I watched my family die." The rifle felt heavier. "And Cassian?" "Cassian wanted what Cassian always wants. Everything. He saw an opportunity and took it. But me?" Rory's eyes were going glassy. "I just wanted him to hurt." Mission accomplished. Seraphina looked around the destroyed ballroom, at the bodies, at the blood, at the empire her father had built, literally coming down around them. "We're all hurting now." She pulled the trigger. The shot echoed through the ruined opera house, bouncing off broken walls and shattered dreams. Then silence. Nothing but the creak of stressed metal, the trickle of water from broken pipes, distant sirens getting closer. "Sarah!" Lorenzo's voice from somewhere in the wreckage. "Seraphina!" "Here!" She dropped the rifle, crawled back to Mrs. Albrecht. Still breathing, barely. "I need medical. Civilian down, gunshot to the chest, status critical." Footsteps. Running. Lorenzo appeared through the smoke and dust, his tuxedo torn, blood on his face from a cut above his eye. He stopped when he saw her, torn dress, covered in blood and dust, holding a dying woman in her lap, and something in his expression broke. "You shouldn't be here," he said quietly. "You were supposed to leave." "Yeah, well, I'm bad at following orders." She looked up at him. "How many?" "Dead?" 37 at last count. More wounded. Some of them won't make it." He knelt beside her, touched her face gently. "You're hurt." "I'll live." "She won't. Not without help." Seraphina looked down at Mrs. Albrecht, at this woman who'd done nothing wrong except accept a wedding invitation. "Get her out. Please." Lorenzo called for medics, and 2 men came running with a stretcher. They loaded Mrs. Albrecht carefully, started an IV, began chest compressions as her pulse faded. Seraphina watched them carry her away and wondered if she'd just saved a life or delayed a death. Above them, Marco and Luca were being helped down from the remains of the second floor, both alive, both mobile. Luca was limping badly but grinning like a maniac. "Did you see that explosion? Perfect timing." "You nearly killed us all," Marco said, but he was grinning too. Adrenaline and survival making them stupid with relief. Seraphina tried to stand and couldn't. Her legs just gave out. Lorenzo caught her before she fell, lifted her like she weighed nothing. "I can walk," she protested. "No, you can't." He started carrying her toward the exit. "You've got at least 3 broken ribs, possible internal bleeding, and you're going into shock. You're going to a hospital. Can't. Press will be there. Questions. Police. Private doctor, safe house. It's already arranged." He pushed through what was left of the south exit, out into the night where a convoy of black SUVs was waiting. "You did good tonight, little wolf. Your mother would be proud. Mama would have told me to run, and I'm telling you she would have stayed too." He set her in the back of an SUV, climbed in beside her. Sometimes the women in this family are smarter than the men. Sometimes they just have bigger balls. Marco got in the front with Luca, who was getting field bandaged by someone who looked like he'd done this before. The convoy pulled away as the first police cars arrived, sirens wailing, lights painting the building in red and blue. Seraphina looked back at the Belladonna Opera House. Smoke rose from the roof. Water poured from broken windows. The place where her mother used to take her to see ballets, where she'd learn to dance and shoot and survive, it was dying. Just like everything else she touched. "Cassian's dead," she said to no one in particular. "Good," Lorenzo said. "Saved me the trouble. Don Antonio will want revenge. His son died trying to betray us, but he was still his son. Let him want. Right now, Don Antonio is bleeding out on the Opera House floor with a bullet in his gut. If he survives, we'll deal with it. If he doesn't," Lorenzo shrugged. "The Moretti family fractures without him. Internal power struggle, civil war. They'll be too busy killing each other to come after us." "That's cold. That's survival." He looked at her. "You want to know what I learned tonight?" "What?" "That you're stronger than I ever gave you credit for. Stronger than me, maybe. You walked into a trap knowing it was a trap. You turned it around. You survived." He took her hand. "I spent 8 years thinking you needed my protection. Turns out you never did." Seraphina leaned her head against the window, watching the city pass by. "I'm tired, Papa. I'm so tired of this." "I know, but you can't quit now. Not when you've won." "Won what?" "I'm covered in blood. My wedding's a crime scene. The man I was supposed to marry is dead, and the man I thought loved me tried to kill me." She closed her eyes. "If this is winning, I'd hate to see losing." The convoy drove for 20 minutes, leaving the city behind, heading into suburbs that turned to countryside. They stopped at a house that looked normal. 2 stories, white siding, a mailbox with fake flowers. But Seraphina knew better. The windows were reinforced. The doors were steel. The basement was probably full of weapons and surveillance equipment. Inside, a doctor was waiting. Older woman, maybe 70, with steady hands and eyes that had seen too much. "On the table," she said, gesturing to what was probably a dining room table converted for exactly this purpose. Seraphina let herself be laid down. Let the doctor cut away what was left of her dress. Let her probe the bruise on her chest where the bullet had hit, feeling for internal damage. "Broken ribs," the doctor confirmed. 3 of them. "But your lungs are intact. No internal bleeding that I can see." "You got lucky." "Doesn't feel lucky." "Lucky's relative." The doctor started wrapping her ribs, tight enough to stabilize, but not so tight she couldn't breathe. "You'll need to rest. No strenuous activity for at least 2 weeks. The pain will be significant." "I don't have 2 weeks." "Then you'll heal wrong and spend the rest of your life dealing with it. Your choice." Seraphina looked at Lorenzo, who stood by the door watching. "What happens now?" "Now we count our dead. Identify the survivors, figure out which families are still with us and which are looking for exits." He pulled out his phone, started scrolling. "Don Antonio's alive. Critical condition but stable. His brothers are already fighting over who takes control if he dies. The Irish, what's left of Rory's cell, are scattered. Most of them died in the explosion." "And the other families?" "Mixed. Some saw tonight as proof we're too dangerous to cross. Others saw it as proof we're weak, unstable. We'll know more in the next 48 hours. He looked up from his phone. "The wedding footage is already online. Someone live-streamed the whole thing. You shooting Rory, the explosion, all of it." Seraphina's stomach dropped. "How bad?" "Depends on your perspective. To some, you're a hero who stopped an assassination. To others, you're a monster who murdered her fiancé and blew up 300 guests." He showed her his phone. The headlines were brutal. Mafia wedding turns massacre. DeLuca princess kills groom, 37 others dead. Blood wedding inside the ballroom shootout. And worse, video clips. Short ones, jerky phone footage. Her standing over Cassian's body, her shooting Rory while he was trapped, her covered in blood and smiling like a demon. She looked like a monster. She looked exactly like what she was. "Turn it off," she said quietly. Lorenzo pocketed his phone. "It's already out there. Can't take it back." "I know." She stared at the ceiling. "I killed him. I shot Rory while he was trapped and I felt nothing. What does that make me?" "Alive, which is better than the alternative." "Is it?" She turned her head to look at her father. 37 people died tonight because I came home. Because I wanted revenge on Sebastian. Because I couldn't just disappear. 37 people died because Cassian and Rory made a play for power and failed. You didn't pull the trigger first, you just pulled it last. Lorenzo moved closer, sat in the chair beside the table. "You want to feel guilty? Fine. Feel guilty. But don't you dare think this is your fault. You didn't start this war. You just finished it." The doctor finished wrapping her ribs and stepped back. "Rest, I mean it. Your body's been through trauma. If you don't give it time to heal, it'll heal wrong." She left the room. Marco and Luca came in, both cleaned up, Luca limping but standing on his own. Her brother looked older somehow, like he'd aged 5 years in 5 hours. "You good?" Luca asked. "Define good." "Not dead." "Then yeah, I'm good." She sat up slowly, every muscle protesting. "You?" 17 stitches and a new appreciation for explosives. He grinned, but it didn't reach his eyes. "That was fucked up, Sarah, like next level fucked up." "I know. But also kind of amazing. Like you blew up your own wedding to kill the guy trying to kill you. I don't even know what that is. Insane? Genius?" "Necessary," Marco said quietly. He stood by the window looking out at the dark yard. "It was necessary. And don't let anyone tell you different." "Marco's right," Lorenzo added. "You made the calls you had to make, hard calls. The kind most people can't make. That's why you're going to lead this family someday." Seraphina stared at him. "What?" "You heard me. When I'm gone, and I will be gone someday, that's just math. You're taking over, not Luca. You." "Hey," Luca protested. "I'm right here. And you're good at tactics. Great at improvisation. But you don't have what she has." Lorenzo didn't take his eyes off Seraphina. "You don't have the ability to do terrible things and keep going. That's not a weakness. That's just who you are. But Seraphina," he smiled. "Seraphina can burn the world down and build something new from the ash. That's a leader." "I don't want to be a leader. No one ever does. That's what makes them good at it." He stood, stretched. "But that's a conversation for another day. Right now, we need to move. This safe house is compromised. Anyone who saw the convoy knows the general area we went. We've got maybe 6 hours before someone comes looking." "Where do we go?" Marco asked. "The compound. Lock it down. Full security. No one in or out without 3 layers of clearance." Lorenzo pulled out his phone again, started making calls. "And we call a meeting. Every family, every ally. We make it clear what happened tonight. We control the narrative before someone else does." Seraphina slid off the table, testing her legs. They held, barely. "I need clothes." "Already handled." Luca gestured to a bag on the chair. "Grab some stuff from your room." "Figured you didn't want to wear what's left of that dress." She looked down at herself. The white slip was red now, completely soaked through with blood. Valentina's, Mrs. Albrecht's, her own. Impossible to tell. She looked like she'd bathed in it. She looked like exactly what the headline said she was. A monster. She changed in the bathroom, peeling away the bloody fabric and replacing it with jeans and a black shirt. Found a jacket to hide the bandages. Pulled her hair back in a ponytail. Looked at herself in the mirror. The woman staring back had hollow eyes and a smile that belonged on a corpse. She looked like her mother. She looked like Lorenzo. She looked like every DeLuca who'd come before her, violent and dangerous and damned. She looked like home. They moved out at dawn. A new convoy of vehicles, different routes, layered security. By the time the sun was fully up, they were back at the DeLuca compound, behind the iron gates, behind the guards and dogs and cameras that saw everything. Safe. Or as safe as anyone ever got in this life. The meeting was scheduled for noon, 5 hours to prepare, to rest, to figure out what the hell she was going to say to the families who'd watched her shoot her fiancé and blow up the most important event of the year. Seraphina spent those 5 hours in her room, staring at the ceiling, trying to remember what it felt like to be someone else. The girl who'd fled to London. The woman who'd married Sebastian. Anyone except the creature she'd become. But she couldn't remember. That person was gone. Had maybe never existed in the first place. Maybe she'd always been this, a monster wearing a woman's face, waiting for the right moment to show teeth. At 11:30, Lorenzo knocked on her door. It's time. She followed him downstairs to the formal dining room where the table had been extended to its full length, seats for 30. The families were arriving, the ones who were still allies, still willing to show up, still willing to risk association with the De Lucas after last night's bloodbath. Don Vittorio from Philadelphia, the Sanchez brothers from Miami, the Bratva representative whose name she couldn't pronounce, the Yakuza liaison, the remnants of the Irish families who hadn't been associated with Rory, even a representative from the Calabrians looking nervous. And at the far end of the table, in a wheelchair with an IV pole attached, Don Antonio Moretti. The silence when Seraphina entered was absolute. She walked to her seat beside Lorenzo, every eye in the room tracking her movement. She could feel their judgment, their fear, their calculation. Half of them wanted to kill her. The other half wanted to use her. All of them were trying to figure out which option was safer. Lorenzo stood. Thank you all for coming on such short notice. I know last night was a massacre. Don Antonio's voice was weak but venomous. He looked like he'd aged 20 years, gray skin, sunken eyes, tubes running into his arms. Your daughter murdered my son in cold blood, in front of witnesses, on camera. Your son was trying to murder my daughter, also on camera. That's a lie. Then explain the messages. Lorenzo nodded, and Marco pulled out a tablet, started projecting the evidence onto the wall. Every text between Cassian and Rory, every plan, every conspiracy. Explain these financial transfers. Explain why your son met with Valentina Russo 6 times before she poisoned someone at our engagement party. The room erupted into shouting, Don Antonio trying to defend his dead son, others demanding explanations, the Bratva representative calling for blood. It was chaos. Seraphina stood. The room went quiet again. You want to know what happened last night? Her voice cut through the noise like a blade. I'll tell you. Cassian Moretti and Rory Costello conspired to kill me and use my death to start a war. They planned it for months. They recruited help from inside both our organizations, and they would have succeeded if I hadn't found out and turned their plan against them. You expect us to believe? I don't care what you believe. She looked at Don Antonio, at the broken man who'd lost his son. Your son was a traitor. He betrayed both our families. He deserved what he got. You have no proof. I have all the proof. Messages, financial records, witness testimony, and most importantly, she pulled out her phone, pulled up a video file. I have this. She played it for the room. Security footage from Cassian's office, time-stamped 3 weeks ago. Audio of him on the phone with Rory, planning the assassination, discussing logistics, laughing about how they'd split the territory after the De Lucas fell. The room went silent. Don Antonio stared at the screen, his face crumbling. No. No, he wouldn't. He did. He was going to kill me, frame the Irish, and let our families destroy each other while he and Rory picked through the remains. Seraphina turned off the video. So yes, I killed him. And I'd do it again. Don Antonio made a sound like a wounded animal. Then he slumped in his wheelchair, all the fight going out of him. I want to go home. You can't, Lorenzo said, not unkindly. Your family's in civil war. 3 of your nephews are claiming leadership. 2 of your captains have already started shooting each other. You go home now. You're dead within an hour. Then let me die. I have nothing left. You have your honor. Lorenzo moved around the table, knelt beside the wheelchair, so they were eye level. Your son was a traitor, but you weren't. You built an empire. You can rebuild it. With what? My son is dead. My organization is fractured. I'm bleeding from a hole in my stomach that might kill me anyway. Don Antonio looked at Lorenzo with something like desperation. Why did you save me? Why not let me die in that ballroom? Because you're not your son, and because this world needs men who remember honor. Lorenzo stood, addressed the room. Last night was a tragedy. 37 dead, dozens more wounded, 2 organizations nearly destroyed. But it doesn't have to be the end. It can be a beginning. A beginning of what? The Bratva representative asked. Of real alliance, not one based on marriage or temporary peace, but one based on mutual survival. Lorenzo looked around the table. The world's changing. Federal agencies are getting smarter. International cooperation is tightening borders. Cryptocurrency is making laundering harder. We can either adapt together or die separately. You're proposing what exactly? Don Vittorio asked. I'm proposing a council. Representatives from every family, shared resources, shared intelligence. No more territories, no more turf wars. We work together or we don't work at all. The room erupted again. Some families were interested, others were outraged. The Calabrian representative looked like he might throw up. Seraphina watched it all and felt nothing. These men and their arguments, their pride, their inability to see that the world had already moved past them, it was pathetic. They were dinosaurs arguing about who got which swamp while the meteor approached. She stood and walked out. No one tried to stop her. She made it to the garden before her legs gave out again, sat on the stone bench near her mother's roses, and finally let herself break. No tears. She was too tired for tears, just a bone-deep exhaustion that made her want to lie down in the dirt and sleep for a year. You okay? She looked up. Luca stood there, still limping, his leg wrapped in fresh bandages. He looked as tired as she felt. Do I look okay? You look like you fought a war and won, but can't remember why you were fighting in the first place. He sat beside her carefully. That's pretty much how I feel too. They sat in silence for a while. The roses were blooming despite everything, deep red, almost black in the shadows. Their mother had planted them the week before she died, had told them that roses thrived on blood and bone meal, that beauty always had roots in death. Seraphina wondered if her mother had known she was dying when she said that, if it was advice or prophecy. I'm sorry, Luca said finally, for what I said before, about you abandoning us, about this being about your ego. You weren't wrong. I wasn't right either. He picked a rose, ignoring the thorns that bit into his palm. You came back because you had nowhere else to go, and you stayed because... He paused. Why did you stay? Because running didn't work the first time, and I'm tired of pretending to be someone I'm not. She took the rose from him, blood and all. This is who I am, who I've always been. I just spent 8 years lying about it. And now? Now I stopped lying. She stood, testing her ribs, finding they hurt less than before. The body was learning, adapting. Come on, we should go back inside before Papa thinks we've fled to Mexico. They walked back to the house together. Inside, the meeting had devolved into smaller conversations, families negotiating, forming sub-alliances, trying to figure out where they fit in this new world Lorenzo was proposing. Don Antonio was being helped into a car, still broken, still hollowed out by grief. He looked at Seraphina as he passed, and she waited for accusation, for rage, for anything. He just nodded once. Acknowledgement. Not forgiveness, but understanding. She nodded back. By evening, most of the families had left. The ones who remained were the ones who'd chosen a side, either with Lorenzo's proposed counsel or against it. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Tomorrow the feds would come asking questions. Tomorrow the press would be relentless. Tomorrow 100 things would go wrong. But tonight, they'd survived. Seraphina found Lorenzo in his study, drinking scotch and staring at a photograph of her mother. He looked old in the lamplight, every one of his 63 years suddenly visible. You did good today, he said without looking up. I blew up a building. Necessary destruction. That's different than chaos. He turned to face her. You know what your mother told me the day before she died? Seraphina shook her head. She said our children would either destroy this empire or rebuild it into something better. She said there was no middle ground, no coasting, that we'd raise them to be conquerors, not caretakers. He smiled. I think she'd be happy with your choice. I haven't chosen anything yet. Yes, you have. You chose to stay. You chose to fight. You chose to become what you were always meant to be. He walked to his desk, pulled out a small box. This was your mother's. She wanted you to have it when you were ready. Inside the box was a ring, not a diamond, something older, a wolf's head carved from onyx, set in platinum that had worn smooth with age, the De Luca family crest, the one Lorenzo wore on his right hand. Papa, you're ready, more than ready. He slid the ring onto her finger, her right hand, not the left where Cassian's engagement ring had been, until she'd torn it off and thrown it into the wreckage. Welcome home, little wolf, for real this time. She looked at the ring, at the symbol of everything she'd tried to escape, everything she'd become anyway. What happens now? She asked. Now you heal, and while you heal, I start building the council, getting commitments, making it real. Lorenzo finished his scotch, and when you're ready, you stand beside me, not as my daughter, as my partner, the future of this family. And if I fail, then we both fail. Together. He pulled her into a hug and she let herself be held, let herself feel small one last time. But you won't fail. You're too stubborn, too smart, too much your mother's daughter. Is that a compliment? Always. They stood like that for a long time, father and daughter, two survivors trying to build something from the ruins. Outside, the compound was settling into night routine, guards changing shifts, lights coming on, the ordinary machinery of survival. Seraphina pulled back finally, wiping her eyes. I'm going to bed. Try not to start any wars while I'm sleeping. No promises. She left him there and climbed the stairs to her room. Her body was screaming at her, the ribs, the bruises, the cuts and scrapes she hadn't even noticed until now. But she was alive. Against all odds, all logic, all probability, she was alive. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost ignored it, then curiosity won. A text message, 2 words. Well played. No signature, no context. But she knew who it was. The mystery person behind everything. The one pulling strings she hadn't even seen yet. She typed back, "Who are you?" The response came immediately. Someone who's been watching you for longer than Cassian ever did. Someone who knows what you did in London, what your father did, what you're both capable of, and someone who's going to make you an offer you can't refuse, soon, but not tonight. Tonight you rest. Tomorrow, the real game begins. The phone went dead. Completely dead. Screen black. Battery drained. Seraphina stared at it, her pulse racing despite the exhaustion, despite the pain, despite everything. Because whoever this was, they weren't Rory, weren't Cassian, weren't anyone she'd dealt with yet. This was someone new, someone worse, and they were just getting started. She looked out her window at the compound, at the walls and gates and guards that were supposed to keep her safe, at the empire she'd just fought a war to protect, and she realized with perfect, terrible clarity. The war wasn't over. It had only just begun. Seraphina didn't sleep that night. She lay in bed staring at the dead phone, turning it over in her hands like it might come back to life and explain itself. Someone who'd been watching longer than Cassian, someone who knew about London, someone who was just getting started. By the time dawn broke gray and cold through her window, she'd made a decision. She was done reacting, done being hunted, done playing defense in a game where the rules kept changing and the enemy kept multiplying. It was time to hunt back. She showered carefully, working around the bandages, letting hot water beat against muscles that felt like they'd been through a meat grinder. Every movement hurt, but the pain was clarifying. Pain meant she was alive. Pain meant she could still fight. She dressed in black, jeans, boots, a shirt that hid the bulge of the shoulder holster she strapped on, loaded her gun with hollow points. They spread on impact, did more damage, made sure whatever you hit stayed down. Her father had taught her that when she was 12. Aim for center mass, double tap, keep moving. Funny how those lessons never left you. Downstairs, the house was already awake. Lorenzo sat at the kitchen table with Marco and 3 men she didn't recognize. Hard faces, military bearing, the kind of specialists you brought in when things got complicated. Maps and laptops covered the table. Coffee cups multiplied like cancer. Sera? Lorenzo looked up, took in her appearance, frowned. You should be resting. I'll rest when I'm dead. She poured herself coffee, drank it black and scalding. Who are they? Former CIA. They do freelance work now. Tracking, surveillance, wet work when necessary. He gestured and the men stood, left the room without being asked. When they were alone, Lorenzo continued, I've had them working since last night, tracing that message you got. And whoever sent it is a ghost, bounced through 17 proxy servers across 9 countries. Even with their resources, we can't pin a location. Marco pulled up a laptop screen showing a map with lines crisscrossing like spider webs. But they made one mistake. The phone they used to send it? It pinged a cell tower in Manhattan before it went dark. Tribeca area. Seraphina studied the map. Tribeca. Expensive neighborhood. Artists and billionaires and people who valued privacy. Hundreds of buildings, thousands of apartments. That's not enough to find them. No, but it's a start. Lorenzo stood, moved to stand beside her. We're going to find whoever this is, and when we do, I handle it, alone. Absolutely not. Papa. She turned to face him. This person knows about London, knows what I did, what you did to protect me. If they go public with that, if they prove I killed Daniel Costello, we're finished. The Irish families will demand blood. The feds will have cause to investigate. Everything falls apart. Which is exactly why you don't go alone. We handle this together. No, we handle this smart. She set down her coffee cup. They said they were going to make me an offer, which means they want something, something they think I can give them. So I let them make their offer. I find out what they want, and then I decide if they live or die. Marco shook his head. That's a trap. You know it's a trap. Everything's a trap. Doesn't mean you don't walk into it. She looked between them. I'm going to Tribeca. I'm going to make myself visible, and I'm going to wait for them to make contact. When they do, I'll have the upper hand because I'll be expecting it. Or you'll have a bullet because they'll be expecting you to expect it, Marco countered. This is tactical stupidity. This is the only play we have. She touched the onyx ring on her right hand, the wolf's head her mother wore before her. You taught me to think 3 moves ahead, Papa. Well, I'm thinking, and this is the move. Lorenzo studied her face for a long time. She could see him calculating, weighing risk against reward, love against strategy. Finally, he nodded, just once. You take Marco, and you wear a wire. If anything goes wrong, we're coming in. Fine, but I do the talking. You always do. They left an hour later, just Seraphina and Marco in an unmarked sedan. The drive into Manhattan took 40 minutes through morning traffic that crawled and surged like something living. Marco drove, his injured shoulder still bothering him based on the way he kept adjusting his grip on the wheel. You know this is insane, he said around mile marker 12. You mentioned that. I'm mentioning it again. Whoever this is, they've been planning this longer than Cassian, longer than Rory. They know things they shouldn't know. They've got resources we haven't identified, and you're walking into their territory with what? A gun and attitude? And you, don't sell yourself short. I'm serious, Sarah. What if they're not alone? What if this is another ambush, another setup? We already lost 37 people. How many more before you admit you can't control this? She looked out the window at the city passing by. Homeless people huddled on subway grates, businessmen speed-walking with coffee cups, a woman pushing a stroller while talking on her phone. Normal people living normal lives, completely unaware that 3 feet away sat a woman who'd killed her fiancé and blown up a building and was driving toward another confrontation that might end just as badly. I can't control it, she said finally. I never could, but I can choose how I meet it, on my terms, not theirs. Marco didn't respond, just drove. They reached Tribeca at 10:30, parked on a side street near Washington Market Park, where mothers watched their children play on equipment designed to prevent injuries. Safe, sanitized, a different world than the one Seraphina lived in. She got out, tested her ribs, found them bearable. Marco activated the wire, a tiny transmitter taped between her shoulder blades, nearly invisible under her shirt. Lorenzo would be listening from the compound, ready to send reinforcements if things went sideways. Stay close, Marco said. And if I say run, you run. No arguments. When have I ever run? That's what worries me. They walked through the neighborhood, Seraphina making herself visible, stopped at a coffee shop, ordered an espresso she didn't drink, walked past high-end galleries and restaurants that served $20 sandwiches, loitered outside a bookstore, waited. Her phone rang at 11:15, not dead anymore. Fully charged, screen bright. She looked at Marco, who nodded. She answered, "Hello? You came." The voice was different this time, not distorted. A woman's voice, cultured. American, but with an accent underneath, British maybe, or European. "I wasn't sure you would." "You said you had an offer. I'm listening." "Not on the phone, in person. There's a building 2 blocks north of where you're standing. Red brick, black door, camera above the entrance. Apartment 4B, come alone. Your friend stays on the street." "Not happening." "Then we don't talk." And tomorrow morning, every newspaper in the city gets an envelope full of evidence about what happened in London 8 years ago. Photos of Daniel Costello's body, forensic reports, witness statements, your DNA at the scene, everything. Seraphina's chest tightened. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" "Want to test that? Want to see your father on trial for 7 murders? Want to watch the empire crumble while he's in a federal prison?" The woman's voice stayed calm, almost friendly. "Or you can come upstairs, alone, have a conversation, and maybe we find a solution that works for both of us." The line went dead. Seraphina looked at Marco. "She wants me alone." "Not happening. We go together or we don't go. If we go together, she releases everything about London. Papa goes to prison. The family falls apart." She touched his arm. "I have to do this. Sarah, I have the wire. You'll hear everything. If it goes bad, you come get me, but I have to try." She started walking before he could argue, heading north, counting blocks. Behind her, she heard Marco curse and follow at a distance. The building was exactly as described. Red brick that had seen better days. Black door with a security camera that tracked her approach. She pressed the button for 4B. The door buzzed open without anyone speaking. Inside, the building was nicer than the exterior suggested. Clean floors, working elevator. The kind of place where people minded their own business and paid rent in cash. She took the stairs instead of the elevator. Elevators were traps, boxes you couldn't escape, and climbed to the 4th floor, her ribs screaming with each step. Apartment 4B had a steel door and a peephole that probably saw more than it should. She knocked. The door opened immediately. The woman standing there was mid-40s, tall and blonde, wearing expensive casual clothes that said money without screaming it. She had kind eyes and a smile that looked genuine. She also had a gun in a shoulder holster that was clearly visible, like she wanted Seraphina to see it. "Come in," the woman said. "We have a lot to discuss." Seraphina entered. The apartment was sparsely furnished. A couch, a chair, a table with 2 laptops and a stack of file folders. Nothing personal. A temporary space. A place for business, not living. "Sit." The woman gestured to the couch. "Can I get you anything? Water? Coffee?" "How about the truth?" "Fair enough." The woman sat in the chair across from her, crossed her legs casually. "My name is Victoria Sterling. I worked for MMI6 until 3 years ago. Now I work for myself." "And what do you want with me?" "I want you to kill someone." Victoria said it simply, like she was asking Seraphina to pick up dry cleaning. "Someone who's been a problem for a very long time. Someone your family has the resources to reach. Someone who, if eliminated, would benefit both of us enormously." Seraphina laughed, and it hurt her ribs. "You're blackmailing me into being your assassin?" "I prefer to think of it as a mutually beneficial arrangement. You kill this person. I bury everything about London. No trial, no investigation, no threat to your father. You get to keep your empire. I get to remove a threat. Everyone wins. Except the person I'm supposed to kill." "Well, yes, but they've earned it." Victoria pulled a file from the table and handed it over. "Read." Inside was a dossier. Photographs, financial records, travel documents, and a name that made Seraphina's blood freeze, Sebastian Cross. "You want me to kill my ex-husband? Not because he cheated on you, because of what he's been doing since your wedding massacre went public." Victoria leaned forward. "Did you know Sebastian's been talking? To the FBI, to journalists, to anyone who'll listen. He's positioning himself as the innocent victim who unknowingly married into a mob family. He's got proof of every business deal you helped him with, every connection you made, every door you opened, and he's using it to build a case against your family. Seraphina looked at the documents. Wire transfer records showing Sebastian moving money offshore, flight manifests showing meetings with federal prosecutors, emails discussing testimony, immunity deals, witness protection. He's turning witness, she said quietly. He's building an empire on your family's corpse. In 6 months, he'll publish a book. In a year, he'll testify before Congress. He'll be the face of organized crime reform, the man who escaped the mob and lived to tell about it. And your father will die in prison. So you want me to kill him before he can testify? I want you to solve a problem that benefits both of us. Sebastian dies, the case against your family falls apart. The evidence about London stays buried. And Victoria smiled. I get to see someone who wronged me pay for it. What did Sebastian do to you? That's personal and irrelevant. Victoria stood, walked to the window, looked out at Tribeca below. You have 48 hours to decide. After that, the London files go public and you can spend the next decade fighting prosecution while your empire crumbles. Or you handle Sebastian and we both move on with our lives. Seraphina wanted to argue, wanted to tell this woman to fuck off, that she didn't take orders, that blackmail was a bad way to start a business relationship. But the evidence was real. The threat was real. And Sebastian had always been weak. Of course he'd run to the feds. Of course he'd trade her family for immunity and book deals and a second chance at relevance. He'd done it before with smaller betrayals. This was just the logical extension. How do I know you'll actually bury the London evidence? Seraphina asked. You don't. But consider this. If I wanted you arrested, I'd have done it already. I want Sebastian dead more than I want your family destroyed. That's your leverage. Victoria turned from the window. And for what it's worth, I respect what you did at that wedding. Most people would have run. You turned it into an opportunity. That takes courage. Or insanity. Possibly both. Definitely both. Seraphina stood, her ribs protesting. I'll think about it. Don't think too long. Clock's ticking. Victoria walked her to the door, opened it. One more thing, the wedding footage, the video of you shooting Rory, it's going viral. You're famous now, or infamous, depends on your perspective. Great, always wanted to be internet famous. Use it. Fear's a currency. Right now, every criminal organization on the East Coast is terrified of the woman who blew up her own wedding to win. That's power. Don't waste it. Seraphina left the apartment, walked down 4 flights of stairs while her mind raced. Sebastian was building a case. Victoria had evidence that could destroy her family. And she had 48 hours to decide if she was going to become a killer again. Marco was waiting on the street corner, trying to look casual and failing completely. You good? Define good. Alive. Not bleeding. Then yeah, I'm good. She started walking back toward the car. You heard everything? Every word. Lorenzo's losing his mind, wants you back at the compound immediately. Too bad. We're going to Manhattan. I need to see Sebastian. Sarah, that's not up for debate. She got in the car. Drive. Marco drove, muttering under his breath about stubborn women and death wishes. Seraphina ignored him, staring out the window, thinking about Sebastian. About the man she'd married believing he was different. The man who was now trying to destroy everything she was to save himself. She should have killed him at the penthouse that night. Should have put a bullet in his head instead of divorce papers on his table. Mercy was a luxury she couldn't afford in this world. Time to correct that mistake. They reached Sebastian's building at noon. The doorman tried to stop them. Mr. Cross wasn't receiving visitors. But one look at Seraphina's face made him step aside. The elevator ride to the penthouse felt longer than it should, like time was stretching, giving her space to reconsider. She didn't reconsider. The penthouse door was locked. Marco picked it in under 30 seconds. Another skill he'd taught her when she was young, another tool in the survival kit every DeLuca child carried. Inside, the place looked worse than when she'd visited days ago. Trash piled in corners, dishes molding in the sink, the smell of stale alcohol and desperation. Sebastian sat at his desk in the office, exactly where she'd left him, like he hadn't moved in 72 hours. He looked up when she entered, and his face went white. Seraphina. We need to talk. I can't. He stood, backed away, hands up like she was pointing a gun at him. She wasn't. Yet. I'm not involved anymore. I cut all ties. I'm out. Bullshit. You're talking to the feds, building a case, planning testimony. She pulled out her phone, showed him the photos Victoria had given her. Want to explain these? Sebastian's face crumbled. How did you? Doesn't matter how. What matters is you're trying to destroy my family to save yourself. After everything I did for you. After I walked away and let you keep your life. She moved closer and he backed into the desk, trapped. I could have killed you that night. Should have. But I showed you mercy. And this is how you repay it? They came to me. His voice went high, desperate. The FBI showed up 3 days after the wedding. They had evidence, they had witnesses. They said I could either cooperate or go to prison as an accomplice. What was I supposed to do? You were supposed to keep your fucking mouth shut. Easy for you to say. You've got an army protecting you. I've got nothing. My business is gone. My reputation's destroyed. I'm broke. He was crying now, tears and snot running down his face. I did what I had to do to survive, just like you. We're not the same, aren't we? You killed Cassian. You blew up a building. You shot a man while he was trapped. How many people died at your wedding, Sarah? 37? And you're standing here judging me for trying to survive? Sebastian laughed, broken and bitter. You're exactly what I feared you were. A monster, just like your father. Just like everyone in your family. She hit him, hard, open-handed across the face, the crack echoing through the empty apartment. He fell back against the desk, blood trickling from his split lip. You're right, she said quietly. I am a monster. But I'm a monster who gave you a choice. Leave the city and live. Stay and face consequences. You chose to stay. You chose to talk. So now you face what comes next. She pulled her gun. Sebastian's eyes went huge. No, no, Sarah, please. Don't do this. I'll recant everything. I'll tell them I lied. Too late for that. She chambered around, the sound impossibly loud in the quiet apartment. You made your play. Now I make mine. Please. God, please. I don't want to die. Neither did the 37 people at my wedding. Neither did Vanessa. Neither did any of the people who got caught in the crossfire of your mistakes. She aimed at his chest. You want to know the difference between us, Sebastian? I own what I am. You just blame everyone else. Her finger tightened on the trigger and stopped. Because standing in the doorway behind Sebastian, visible in the reflection of the window, was a man she recognized. Tall, dark suit, FBI credentials on his belt. Special Agent James Morrison. She knew him by reputation. He'd been trying to build a RICO case against the DeLucas for years. Never got enough evidence. Never found a witness who'd talk. Until now. Step away from him, Ms. DeLuca. Morrison's voice was calm, professional. He had his own gun drawn, aimed at her back. Put the weapon down and step away. Seraphina didn't move, didn't lower her gun, just stared at Sebastian's terrified face and felt the trap close around her. This is interesting timing, Agent Morrison, she said calmly. Almost like you knew I'd be here. Almost like we've had Mr. Cross's apartment under surveillance since he agreed to cooperate. Almost like every word you've said in the last 5 minutes is on tape. Morrison moved closer, gun steady. Put it down, now, or I'll put you down. She believed him. Federal agents didn't bluff when they had the shot. Seraphina lowered her gun, set it on the desk, raised her hands. Behind her, Marco was probably having a heart attack listening through the wire, already calling Lorenzo, already mobilizing extraction. But none of that would matter if Morrison arrested her here. If he had tape of her threatening Sebastian, confessing to the wedding killings, admitting to everything. Turn around slowly, Morrison ordered. She turned. He looked exactly like his photos. 50, gray hair, tired eyes that had seen too much, and stopped being surprised by human evil. He kept his gun on her while speaking into his radio. This is Morrison. I need backup at the Cross residence. And call the DA. Tell him we've got Seraphina DeLuca on tape threatening a federal witness with murder. This won't stick, Seraphina said. I've got lawyers who'll bury you in motions before you finish the paperwork. Maybe. But even if it doesn't stick, it'll make you famous. National news, congressional hearings, every reporter in the country digging into your family. Morrison smiled. Even if you walk, the damage is done. The DeLuca empire becomes too toxic to operate. You lose everything. He was right. Even an arrest would be catastrophic. The publicity alone would end them. She looked at Sebastian, still cowering against the desk. This was the plan all along. You bait me here. He records everything. I get arrested and you get your immunity. I'm sorry, Sebastian whispered, but I told you. I'm doing what I have to do to survive. So am I. She grabbed the lamp off the desk and threw it at Morrison. He dodged, but it bought her a second. She dove left as he fired, the bullet punching through the wall where her head had been. Hit the floor rolling, her ribs screaming, and came up with her backup piece, the ankle gun Marco had let her borrow, small and easily concealed. Morrison was already turning, already aiming for center mass. Professional, trained, she was faster. She shot him twice in the chest. He went down hard, blood spreading across his white shirt. His gun skittered away. He tried to reach for it, couldn't, just lay there gasping. Seraphina stood over him, her own gun steady. Sorry, Agent Morrison. Wrong day to fuck with my family. Sebastian was screaming. She ignored him, walked to Morrison, kicked his gun further away, and knelt beside him. How many people know about this surveillance? She asked. He coughed blood. Fuck you. Wrong answer. She pressed her gun against his thigh and fired. He screamed, thrashing. How many? Just me and my partner. He was going into shock, pupils dilating. But she's 5 minutes out. Then I've got 5 minutes. Seraphina stood, looked at Sebastian. Where's the recording equipment? I don't. Where? He pointed at the bookshelf with a shaking hand. She found it quickly. A digital recorder hidden inside a fake book. Everything she'd said preserved on a hard drive smaller than her palm. She pulled it out, stomped on it until the casing cracked, pulled out the drive and pocketed it. Marco burst through the door, gun drawn, and stopped when he saw Morrison bleeding on the floor. Jesus Christ, Sarah. He was going to arrest me, had tape of everything I said. So you shot a federal agent? Marco ran his hands through his hair. This is bad. This is really fucking bad. I know. Help me. She grabbed Morrison's arms. We move him to the bedroom, stage it like a suicide. Sebastian found out he was betrayed, shot Morrison, shot himself. That's insane. You have a better idea? Marco didn't. Together they dragged Morrison into the bedroom. He was still alive, still breathing, but fading fast. 2 bullets to the chest. He had maybe minutes left. I'm sorry, Seraphina told him. She meant it. He was just doing his job. But her family came first, always. If there's a hell, I'll see you there. She shot him once more in the head, clean, quick, merciful as she could make it. Then she turned to Sebastian. He'd collapsed in the corner of the office, crying, rocking back and forth like a child. When he saw her approach, he started screaming. No, you can't. This wasn't the deal. Morrison said I'd be safe. Morrison was wrong. She raised her gun. You know what your mistake was, Sebastian? You forgot what I told you the night I left. I warned you to run, to get out of the city. But you stayed. You thought you were smart enough to play both sides. You weren't. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'll do anything. It's too late for sorry. She pulled the trigger. Sebastian Cross died instantly, slumping against the wall, a neat hole in his forehead. Seraphina stood there, gun still raised, and felt absolutely nothing. No satisfaction, no guilt, just a cold, practical certainty that this was necessary. Marco was already moving, wiping down surfaces, staging the scene. We've got maybe 2 minutes before Morrison's partner arrives. We need a story. We came here to talk, found Morrison and Sebastian both dead. Looks like Sebastian shot Morrison and then himself. We don't know why. We're shocked, devastated. We immediately called police. That's thin. That's all we have. She holstered her gun, checked herself in the mirror. Blood spatter on her shirt. She stripped it off, turned it inside out, put it back on. Better. Make the call. Marco called 911 while Seraphina went through the apartment one more time, looking for anything that might contradict their story. Found Morrison's phone, checked his last messages, nothing sent in the last 30 minutes. Good. His partner didn't know he'd made contact. They waited in the hallway, listening to sirens approach. Seraphina's heart was pounding, but her hands were steady. This was the gamble. If the police bought the murder-suicide angle, they were clear. If they didn't, you good? Marco asked. I just killed 2 people. I'm fantastic. I mean it, Sarah. Can you sell this? She looked at him. At the man who'd protected her since she was a child, who'd taught her to shoot and fight and survive, who'd followed her into every trap, every danger without question. I've been selling myself my whole life, Marco. This is just another performance. The police arrived 3 minutes later. Detectives, uniforms, crime scene techs. They separated Seraphina and Marco immediately, took statements in different rooms. A detective whose name tag read Walsh sat across from her, recording everything. "Walk me through what happened," Walsh said. "I came to talk to Sebastian. We were married briefly, divorced after he cheated. I wanted closure." She kept her voice shaky, vulnerable. "The door was unlocked. We came inside and found—" She stopped, covered her mouth. "We found them. Both of them. There was so much blood." "Did you touch anything?" "No, God no. We called you immediately." "Why were you armed?" "My family has enemies. I always carry protection." "Your family?" Walsh leaned back. "The DeLuca family. You're Lorenzo DeLuca's daughter." "Yes." "And Sebastian Cross was preparing to testify against your family in a federal investigation." "I didn't know that. I just knew he cheated on me, and I wanted answers." "Convenient timing." "Not convenient. Tragic." She met his eyes. "Agent Morrison was a good man doing his job. Sebastian was—" Her voice cracked perfectly. "Sebastian was weak and scared, and I wish I'd helped him instead of judging him, but I can't change what happened. I can only live with it." Walsh studied her face for a long time. She let him look. Let him see whatever he wanted to see. Grief, shock, innocence. She'd worn all those masks before. They fit like old clothes. Finally, he closed his notebook. "We'll need you to come down to the station tomorrow. Give a formal statement." "Of course. Anything to help." They let her go at 6 p.m. Marco was waiting in the lobby, looking shaken but intact. They walked to the car in silence, got in, drove 3 blocks before either spoke. "Did they buy it?" Marco asked. "I think so. We'll know in the next 48 hours. If they bring us in for more questioning, it's bad. If they close it as murder-suicide, we're clear. And if they find evidence we missed, then we run." She looked out the window at Manhattan sliding past, the city that had chewed her up and spit her out and then pulled her back in. "We run, and we don't stop." But she knew they wouldn't run. She was done running. They got back to the compound at 8 p.m. Lorenzo was waiting in the war room with Luca and half a dozen senior lieutenants. When Seraphina entered, every conversation stopped. "Tell me," Lorenzo said quietly. So she told him. All of it. Victoria Sterling's blackmail, Sebastian's testimony, Morrison's surveillance, the shooting, the staging, the gamble they were taking that the police would buy their story. When she finished, the room was silent. Then Lorenzo started laughing. Deep and genuine. The kind of laugh she hadn't heard from him in years. "You shot a federal agent and staged a murder-suicide and walked away clean?" "Maybe. We don't know yet." "No, you did. I can feel it." He crossed to her, pulled her into a hug. "That's my girl. That's my daughter." Luca was less enthusiastic. "Sarah, you killed an FBI agent. If they figure it out—" "They won't. Not if we're smart. Not if we control the narrative." She pulled away from Lorenzo. Sebastian was desperate, cornered. He shot Morrison to keep him from testifying about something, then killed himself out of guilt. It's plausible. It's insane. It's survival. She sat down heavily, suddenly exhausted. And it's done. We can't undo it. We can only move forward. "What about Victoria Sterling?" Marco asked. "She's still out there with the London evidence, still waiting for you to kill Sebastian." "Sebastian's dead, mission accomplished. Now we see if she holds up her end of the bargain." Lorenzo frowned. "And if she doesn't?" "Then we find her and I put a bullet in her head too. I'm getting pretty good at it." Seraphina closed her eyes, let the exhaustion wash over her. "But that's tomorrow's problem. Tonight I need sleep, and maybe a new identity." She slept for 14 hours straight. No dreams, no nightmares, just black, empty nothing that felt like mercy. When she woke, the sun was setting again. A whole day lost. Her phone had 17 missed calls from Lorenzo, 9 from Marco, 3 from Luca, and 1 text from an unknown number. "Well done. The London files are destroyed. Consider us even, and welcome to the game. You're going to do well here. V. Seraphina stared at the message for a long time. Then she deleted it, threw her phone across the room, and screamed into her pillow until her throat was raw. She'd won, killed her ex-husband, killed a federal agent, eliminated the threat to her family, made a deal with a blackmailer, and came out ahead. She'd won. So why did she feel like she'd lost everything? The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of damage control and consolidation. The police closed Sebastian's death as a murder-suicide exactly like they'd hoped. Morrison had a history of depression, Sebastian was facing federal charges. The narrative wrote itself. The FBI investigated but found nothing to contradict the official story. The DA quietly closed the Rico case for lack of a cooperating witness. The DeLuca family survived. More than survived. Lorenzo's proposed counsel gained traction. 7 families committed. 4 more were considering. The wedding massacre, instead of destroying them, had proven their strength. Proven that you didn't fuck with the DeLucas and walk away. Seraphina became a ghost story. The woman who blew up her own wedding, who shot her fiancé in front of witnesses, who walked into a trap and walked out victorious. Young recruits whispered her name like a legend. Rival families avoided her territory. Even the Bratva, who feared no one, gave her a respectful distance. She'd become exactly what Victoria Sterling said she would. A symbol. A warning. A queen built from blood and bones. And she hated every second of it. 1 month after the wedding, she drove back to the Belladonna Opera House. Or what was left of it. The building was condemned, wrapped in caution tape and plywood. But the guard at the perimeter fence recognized her, let her through without question. Inside, the destruction was total. The explosion had gutted the main ballroom, collapsed the second floor, left everything twisted and charred and dead. Water damage from the firefighters' efforts had stained everything black. The chandelier lay in pieces, crystals scattered like teeth. This was where she'd almost died, where 37 people had died, where her future with Cassian, a future built on lies but still a future, had exploded into nothing. She stood in the center of the ruin and tried to remember who she was before all this, before Sebastian's betrayal, before coming home, before London. But that person was gone, had maybe never existed. She'd always been this creature, always been capable of violence and calculation and survival at any cost. She'd just spent years pretending otherwise. Thought I'd find you here. She turned. Luca stood in the doorway, hands in his pockets, looking older than his 26 years. How'd you know? She asked. Because this is where it all changed, where you stopped being Sarah and became Seraphina DeLuca. He walked into the ballroom carefully, testing the floor for stability. People always return to the place where they transformed. It's like a pilgrimage. That's poetic for you. I've been reading, trying to understand what we've become. He stood beside her, looking at the destruction. You know what I figured out? What? We're not the monsters. We're what happens when you survive monsters. He picked up a piece of the shattered chandelier, turned it over in his hands. We didn't choose this world. It chose us. We just learned to thrive in it. Is that supposed to make me feel better? It's supposed to make you feel nothing, because nothing's easier than guilt. He dropped the crystal, and it shattered further. You did what you had to do. Sebastian, Morrison, Cassian, Rory, they all made choices that put them in your path. You didn't create their fates. You just became the instrument of it. That's a fucked up philosophy. That's the DeLuca philosophy. The only one that matters in this life. He looked at her. Are you okay? Really? No, but I will be. She touched the onyx ring on her hand, the wolf that marked her as heir to everything her father had built. I have to be. They left the opera house together. Outside, the city was moving on, already forgetting the massacre, already finding new scandals to obsess over. In 3 months, the wedding would be a footnote. In a year, most people would have forgotten it happened. But Seraphina would never forget, would carry the weight of 37 bodies, 2 murders, and the death of the woman she'd tried to be. 6 months after the wedding, Lorenzo called a meeting of the council. 13 families now, representatives from New York, New Jersey, Philadelphia, Boston, Miami, every major organization on the East Coast. They met in a neutral location, a hotel ballroom that had been swept for bugs and surrounded by security from all sides. Seraphina attended as her father's second, sitting beside him at the head of the table while the families negotiated territories, resources, strategies. She spoke when spoken to, offered insights when asked, made suggestions that were implemented without question, because they were afraid of her, all of them. They'd seen what she was capable of. They'd watched her burn down her own life to win. They knew challenging her meant death. The meeting ended with agreements signed, territories respected, a fragile peace established. As the families filed out, Don Vittorio from Philadelphia stopped beside her chair. "You remind me of your mother," he said quietly. "She had the same fire, the same willingness to do whatever was necessary. Did you know her well?" "Well enough to be terrified of her, and to respect her enormously." He smiled. "Your father's lucky to have you. We all are." He left. Seraphina sat alone in the empty ballroom, surrounded by chairs and tables and the architecture of power, and wondered if her mother had felt this empty, if she'd carried the same weight, if she'd ever found peace with what she was. Lorenzo appeared in the doorway. "Ready to go home?" "Is anywhere really home anymore?" "No, but we pretend anyway." He offered his hand. "Come on, little wolf. We've got work to do." She took his hand, let him pull her up. Together they walked out of the hotel, into the waiting cars, back to the compound where guards and gates and the machinery of survival never stopped. 1 year after the wedding, Seraphina stood in the garden behind the compound, staring at her mother's roses. They were blooming despite the cold October morning, deep red, almost black, thriving on the blood and bone meal that fed their roots. She thought about Victoria Sterling sometimes, wondered if the woman was real or just another ghost in a world full of them, wondered if the London evidence was truly destroyed or just waiting to resurface at the worst possible moment. But mostly, she didn't think about it, because thinking about it changed nothing. She thought about Sebastian, about the boy she'd married believing he was different, believing love could exist separate from power. She'd been wrong. Everything was power. Everything was survival. Love was just the lie people told themselves to make the violence bearable. She thought about Cassian, about childhood promises and grown-up betrayals, about how easily devotion became obsession, how quickly love turned to poison. She thought about all the people who died because of choices she made, paths she chose, wars she fought. 37 at the wedding, 2 in the penthouse, the 7 her father killed in London, all of them stacked up like cordwood, fueling the fire that kept her family alive. And she thought about who she'd become. Not the girl who fled to London, not the woman who married Sebastian, something else, something harder, something that would never run again because there was nowhere left to run to. Luca found her there, like he always did when she got too quiet, too inside her own head. "Papa wants to see you," he said. "Something important." She followed him inside to Lorenzo's study, where her father sat behind his desk looking older than usual. He gestured to the chair across from him. "Sit." She sat. Lorenzo studied her face for a long moment. Then he pulled out a folder, slid it across the desk. "What's this?" she asked. "Your inheritance. Not the money, not the territory. The truth." He leaned back. "Everything your mother wanted you to know, everything she made me promise to tell you when you were ready. I think you're ready now." Seraphina opened the folder. Inside were letters in her mother's handwriting, dozens of them, dated across years, all addressed to her. She looked up at Lorenzo. "Why now?" "Because you've become what she always knew you would. Not a victim, not a survivor. A queen." He smiled, and there was sadness in it. "Read them, learn from them, and then decide what kind of queen you want to be." She took the folder to her room, locked the door, and read. Her mother's words painted a picture of a woman who'd struggled with the same questions, who'd killed to protect her family, who'd built an empire alongside Lorenzo, who'd loved her children so fiercely she'd do anything to keep them safe, who died knowing the world would try to break them and hoping she'd made them strong enough to survive it. The last letter was dated a week before her mother died. "My darling Seraphina," it read, "if you're reading this, I'm gone. And if you're reading this, you've discovered what you're truly capable of. I want you to know I'm not disappointed. I'm not ashamed. I'm proud. Because you're doing what I taught you, surviving at all costs. But remember this, survival isn't the same as living. Don't let this world take everything from you. Don't let power become the only thing you love. Find something worth protecting beyond the empire. Find someone who sees you not as a DeLuca, but as Seraphina, That's the only way to stay human in a world that wants to turn you into a monster. I love you always, even when you can't love yourself. Mama. Seraphina folded the letter carefully, pressed it against her chest, and finally let herself cry. Not for her mother, not for the dead, but for the girl she'd been who believed she could escape this life, for the woman she'd become who knew she never could, for all the versions of herself she'd killed to survive. She cried until there was nothing left, until she was hollow and clean and ready to continue, because that's what DeLucas did. They survived, they adapted, they won, even when winning felt like losing, even when the crown weighed so heavy it crushed you, even when the only way forward was through blood and fire and becoming exactly what you'd always feared. 2 years after the wedding, Seraphina DeLuca stood at the head of the council table, not beside Lorenzo, but in his place. He'd stepped back 6 months ago, health failing, ready to pass the torch. The families had voted unanimously. She was the new head of the DeLuca Empire, the youngest Dawn in history, the first woman to lead the council. She looked around the table at the men who'd once terrified her, who now waited for her approval, who now answered to her. "Gentlemen," she said, her voice carrying easily through the room, "let's talk about the future." And somewhere, in the garden, behind the compound, her mother's roses bloomed red and beautiful and thriving on the blood and bone of everything that came before. The end wasn't happy. It wasn't sad. It just was, like everything in this world, like Seraphina herself, a survivor, a queen, a monster in woman's skin who'd learned that the only way to survive was to become the thing everyone feared. And she was done apologizing for it.